Hello everyone. I am the Midnight Narrator and I am here today to help you. I know you are using this video to fall asleep, so before we begin, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Write in the comments where you're from and what time you're watching this. Now get comfortable and relax. Life is weird. I've been through a lot, through my childhood and adolescence and all the way up to now. One thing all those years have taught me for sure though, life is weird. It brings joy and tragedy. I'll never forget that. Not after everything that's happened to me recently. Not after the horrors and bloodshed that engulfed my life. It all started so simply. So fucking simply. Well, I should probably start off from the beginning. I'm Rachel and I'm a librarian. I'm also lonely as hell. It's weird. I've got 2 master's degrees, I've got a permanent, full-time, high-paying job, and I'm a working professional. I've got an excellent apartment, decked out just how I want it, and I love myself. I really do, just I seem to be the only one where that last one's concerned. Add to that, I don't have many friends, though that's my fault. I usually keep people at a distance. It's easier for me to live my life that way. Then everything changed, everything. You start to give up hope, you start to think everything will stay the same as it always has been, that nothing will ever change. Then life surprises you. I first saw him at the comic shop downtown. It was a big one of the main comic shops of the city I lived in. For my own reasons, all I'll say is it's a major West Coast Canadian one. I was paying for some trades of a particular limited series that was heavily based off of, to the point of being a spiritual sequel of a lesser-known British spy drama from the 80s. So there I am, waiting for my debit transaction to go through and wondering where I'm going to grab dinner tonight. I was making some small talk with the clerk as I did so. One who, oddly enough, I didn't know as he was new. Just started a couple weeks ago. Real nice guy, though. Really talkative. Then just as my transaction goes through and I'm about to leave, the guy behind me speaks up. "Hey, is that the comic based off of the Sandbaggers?" he asks, pointing to what I was buying. I widened my eyes a bit in surprise and, glancing at my comic, chuckled and nodded. "Yeah, it is. I kind of love the show," I said, smiling sheepishly. He laughed back. I narrowed my eyes a tad as I got a good look at him. He was cute. Tall, slim body, sharp face, hazel eyes, and dark hair that went down to his chin in waves. He had a soft look to him, innocent, sincere. I like those types. I don't know how to describe it, but I'm very good at picking out those types of people. Very good. So I wasn't creeped out when he started chatting with me after I'd finished my purchase. He quickly introduced himself. His name was Ryan. And then got to talking me up, walking me out of the store as he and the clerk nodded and waved at each other with familiarity, the clerk's big gold watch catching my eye. Ryan started gushing over how much he'd loved the Sandbaggers and how much he wanted to try the comic based off of it. I smiled hard. I loved that old show and thought it was one of the most intelligent shows ever written, and I said so. "What? That's nuts, that's what I think too. It is such a brilliant show." He laughed hard and a bright, delighted smile appeared on his face. I started to blush. I liked him. He was charming and he was easy to talk to. "Yeah, exactly," I said, nodding as we stood on the sidewalk outside the store. "What I love about it is that it's just so realistic. Like, it's what spy work actually is, not some James Bond crap. There's not enough content out there like that these days." His eyebrows rose in surprise as I said that. "Hey, if you want to know what kind of good content is out there, I'm your guy. I have a degree in film studies and I write for this TV website. Editorials, that kind of thing." Now I was kind of interested. It did occur to me that this may have been his way of arranging to contact me later. Well, come on, that's exactly what it was, but you know, it didn't bother me, not a bit. "Sure thing, I'd love that. Here, let me give you my number." Taking his phone as he handed it to me, I entered it into his contacts database. He was starting to blush as he took it back from me. "I'll call you in a couple days with some TV recommendations, of course." That last part was thrown on at the end, kind of abruptly. I started to giggle because, like him, it was kind of cute. So that was that. We said goodbye and he headed off. I was about to head off, but as I checked my pocket, I realized my wallet wasn't there. My eyes shot wide open in terror as panic hit me. I calmed down a few seconds later when I realized that my wallet had to be in the store, because I did pay for my comic. Racing back inside, desperately hoping that no one had grabbed it and walked off, I was so relieved to see it lying there on the counter. The clerk there, chatting with his boss, nodded to me. "Hey, I kept it safe for you. I wanted to go give it to you, but you were busy with that guy." "Thanks so much," I gushed, breathing a massive sigh of relief. I grabbed it off the counter and jammed it into my pocket and turned to walk out. Then they started talking about something that chilled me to the bone. "Yeah, apparently the guy was completely cut apart," the clerk's boss said to his underling in a low voice, but loud enough for me to hear. "That's nuts. How many people have been killed that way?" the clerk asked. "I don't know, a bunch. I have a friend on the police force, says it's a serial." His voice was thick with tension and fear. I was out of there in a second flat and walking, quickly, toward home. What they were talking about terrified me. Why did it terrify me? Well, it wasn't precisely because I'm afraid of serial killers. Well, I mean, who isn't? But it's because of an experience I had in the park a week ago. An experience where I nearly got killed. How do I begin? How do I describe it? I had just finished eating out and was heading home. I was strolling through the park and I heard something, the sounds of footsteps. I looked behind me and couldn't see much, but I knew they were getting close. I took off running. Moments later, I felt a rough, hard, cold grip grab onto my shoulder, and that set me off. I took off running faster than I'd ever thought possible. I didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks out of the park. I was crying when I got home, and when I climbed into bed, I was shaking. The next morning, it was in the news. A woman had been found, viciously mutilated and disemboweled, in the very park I was in the very section I was in. So I was on edge whenever I heard about stuff like that. How could you not be? Anyways, what else could I do? I lived my life. I got home from the comic shop and set the rest of the day to reading through my find. The art and the storyline was amazing and well worth the purchase. Midway through the book, I started to think about Ryan. I warmed up inside thinking of him. I didn't know him that well. I was going to have to get to know him better. But he was a guy showing interest in me. That never really happened. Something about me, right? It gets frustrating. Maybe it's because I didn't have good social skills growing up. I grew up in a kind of commune with my family and their friends outside of civilization. So even now I was still adjusting to it, you know? Dealing with men, dealing with other people. It was hard dealing with people. Let's just say I'm not exactly a people person, all things considered. But it was all right. I was improving clearly if a guy was interested in me. For the rest of the night, I watched TV. On the news, there was yet another report of the serial killer, and again, my blood ran cold. And again, I tried to ignore what all my instincts were telling me of the news reports, the ways the bodies were torn apart, the deep gouges and incisions into them, the screaming of my logical reasoning telling me that no human could do that kind of damage to another human being. No, don't think about it. Don't think about it. It hasn't followed you here. Your past is in your past. I went to bed trying to bury my anxiety with sleep. It worked. The call came in the afternoon of the next day. When I heard Ryan's voice, I lit up. "Hi, Ryan," I shot out, brightly and energetically. "Rachel, it's so good to talk to you." His voice was enthusiastic, full of passion. I liked that. "Yeah, likewise," I remarked, my voice still happy. "So yeah, TV shows, what have you got for me?" Where to begin? After a brief moment of silence, he was talking again. "Let's talk about HBO first. They've got such great stuff. You got a pen and paper ready?" That was the start of a 3-hour-long phone conversation. The topic quickly drifted away from television into just life. Who Ryan was, what he was passionate about, that sort of thing. He was born in New York, but had lived in Canada ever since he graduated from university 6 years ago. He'd been on the East Coast till a year and a half ago, but had moved out here for a change of scenery, change of pace. So he put it. He loved television and film, and he was working as a production assistant on film and television productions here in the city. I'll be honest, I was smiling the whole way through the conversation. He was so interesting. Thinking back on that conversation now, I feel sad. I know I shouldn't, I've done nothing wrong, but with how things turned out. Anyways, the next evening we were walking together downtown, chatting as we headed for dinner. The conversation soon turned to my history. "So, Rach, where are you from?" My eyebrows shot up and I looked over at him. "What do you mean?" He laughed. "You know, where are you from? Where did you grow up? That kind of thing." My brow furrowed and I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. How to begin describing my childhood and adolescence? Well, I started. I grew up in a commune in this rural area up north. His eyes went wide with interest. A commune? I've never met anyone who grew up on one of those. What was it like? Well, I don't know. It's weird, I said, laughing, getting uncomfortable with the conversation topic. Basically, we were very separated from civilization. It's what my family and their associates really believed, that, well, it's better this way for us. We were basically Amish. And you decided to leave? Yeah, it wasn't for me. I wanted more. I took a breath and continued. And I found it. I love my new life, and as hard as it is, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I meant it. I really meant it. This was what I'd chosen, and difficulties aside, it was what I loved. He nodded, and just then, we reached the diner we were going to eat at. Thank God. I don't like talking about my old life. I left the commune for a reason, and though I'll always be part of my family, I'm happier here in my new life. A half hour later, we were at our table eating some amazing fettuccine. I talked him into ordering pasta instead of steak, because I can't really eat animals. It just turns me off, doesn't mix well with me. It's something that's been with me since I was a kid. My family's the same way. Anyways, the place we were in was nice. Run down, but nice. The wallpaper was peeling, the dishes were piled up behind the counter, but it was a place you could learn to love. So, you hear about this serial killer stalking the city? Ryan asked, looking up from cutting up his food. I groaned. Oh God, don't even remind me, it's so horrifying, isn't it? My heart started to beat faster. I got anxious whenever anyone mentioned that person to me. I couldn't help it. I know it's awful, like I want to feel safe in this city, but I feel like I can't. I know, I feel the same way. I did. I really did. But anyways, I continued. Let's talk about something better than someone who murders people for fun. Ryan nodded, and we started talking about Christopher Nolan and his films. It was such a good conversation. I always had such good conversations with Ryan in hindsight. And I was feeling delightfully happy and tipsy as I was walking back to my place afterwards. It was just so great. It was so hard living in the city. My family told me it wasn't right for me, that it would be so hard for me, and it was. It really was, living in the city, being among the people but not really of them. Then Ryan came, and I realized that I could actually have someone, one person to be close to be intimate with. So yeah, my night was going pretty good as I had all that on my mind as I stumbled home slightly drunk, except that it didn't stay that way. See, I started to feel like I was being followed. Then what I ended up seeing started to back up those feelings. It was about 15 minutes after I left Ryan that I had that feeling. I looked behind me, trying to look casual, but didn't notice much. I did take note of the people behind me, though. That would help me a lot later on. 15 minutes after that, I was walking down an alleyway by myself. I looked behind me, damned near terrified at this point, and I saw someone. Just one person. The same person who was a ways behind me 15 minutes earlier. He was wearing a dark coat, jeans, and a baseball cap tucked down to hide his face, in addition to his chin tucked down. His hands were tucked into his coat pockets. There was something about him, something odd, something familiar, but regardless, at this point, I wasn't taking any chances. I took off running, terrified of what might happen. The fear my parents had bred into me of the outside world lit up inside of me like a Christmas tree. I didn't stop until I got back home. As I slammed the door behind me and locked it, my heart was beating like a jackhammer inside of me, and I couldn't stop shaking. This had to be the guy that grabbed me in the park. It had to be. I collapsed onto my couch, still shaking just as hard as I had when I stepped through the door. Thoughts started flooding through my head. Fear, anxiety. Most of all, though, what my father had told me when I left the commune. "You're not ready for what's out there," he said to me. "You'll see. You'll see." I wish I could say I shoved his words out of my head, that I forced them out, but I didn't. I dwelt on them. I went over them in my head over and over and over. I still can't remember falling asleep. I just know that I fell asleep. The next morning was fine. I was still terrified, but I just went about my life. Showered, got dressed, went to work, tried to focus. Tried to put it all out of my head. That was it. For the next 3 months. Work, keep your head down, pretend everything's okay. I didn't tell Ryan. I couldn't, don't be stupid, I don't expect you to understand, but to involve him in this would be dangerous for both of us. I couldn't. For that time I withdrew. No more socializing with people at work. Just keep at your job. Don't let these people into your life. Basically, I had retreated to my comfort zone. I wasn't willing to let anyone in but Ryan. On that note, though, Ryan and me, it was grand. It was lovely. I got to know him so much better. I got to see how his eyes would light up when he'd watch Fellini, or when he'd read a screenplay from his filmmaking friends. I got to see how his voice would just get full of energy and excitement when talking about his sister and her kids, or when he was talking about his on-the-side work for a non-profit fighting sex trafficking. He was passionate and energetic about all the things that mattered, and soft and tender in all the right ways. One night, okay, goddammit, one fucking night he's in my bedroom, right? We'd just finished making love and we were talking. Things turned serious, though. Right after he finished asking me if I always go down this certain route when I'm walking home, he was telling me these things. He was telling me that he'd never felt this way about anyone before. He was telling me that it was important to him that I know that. He told me he really, honestly, truly cared about me and that I mattered to him. I mattered to him, I'll never forget that. Never. So, naturally, I was spending lots of time with him when I could. Because I was being stalked, I didn't feel comfortable eating out, so I stayed in and ordered in a lot. You do what you can, right? One night, something happened. Something that would impact everything else that happened afterwards. Ryan and I had just finished eating ordered-in Chinese food and watching a bunch of Shaw Brothers kung fu flicks. And then he looks at me with this excited gleam in his eye. "What?" I asked, my lips curling up in a giggle. I knew when he was up to something. He put his finger up, telling me as such to wait, and got up and trotted over to his bag. Kneeling down, he dug through it and then pulled out a box that was gift-wrapped. It was rectangular and not too big, but big enough. My eyes went wide as he walked over to the couch and, sitting down, handed it to me. "For me?" I asked, my eyes happily wide. He nodded, a huge grin on his face. Excited, I ripped the wrapping paper off only to see that it was a Superman statuette. My face broke out into a look of sheer joy because I loved Superman. He was my favorite superhero, and for Ryan to get me this, well, it showed what a sweetheart he was. I looked over at him and, grabbing his shirt, gave him a fierce kiss on the mouth. Leaning back, I looked at my new item. In the box, Superman was standing tall and proud, his fists on his hips and his chest thrust out. His eyes had this steely, far-sighted look in them, as if he's just looking out into all the realms of possibility. I loved it. I really fucking loved it. "Ryan," I said, looking over at him and smiling, "you are the biggest sweetheart imaginable." "I try," he said, cracking a grin. We spent the next 20 minutes opening it up and setting it up just right, where I could always have it in my line of sight whenever I was in the living room. Finally, it was on my TV stand, right next to my TV. It looked wonderful. Wonderful, yeah, fucking right. We'll get back to my Superman statuette later. For now, I'll go into how I was handling my stalker problem. I had to switch up my routine, change my activities to maintain some semblance of security. Like I said, I couldn't tell Ryan. In the midst of all this, I began planning on how to confront this person, this stalker. I had to trick him somehow, trap him. So naturally, I put a lot of thought and work into figuring him out as much as I could. A lot of work and thought. I ended up putting the work in, getting the resources I needed off the internet, studying how stalkers worked, how police and security organizations usually tailed a person. I studied how to figure out if you were being spied on, that kind of deal. Like I said, I put a lot of thought into this. It was interrupted, though. Interrupted by what I saw on the news one evening in the midst of all this. It was the afternoon, and it was breaking news. A leaked confidential police report describing the murders of the serial killer as not having possibly been committed by a human being, but rather by some sort of animal or beast. That's the rub, though. It couldn't have been an animal or beast because, as the report went on to say, they were too methodical, too planned out, too typical of a serial killer. My heart went heavy. It had followed me here. My past had followed me here. Everything my parents told me that would happen had happened. The one that looks human but isn't, of course. "You can't run," my mother told me. I remembered it as clear as if it were yesterday. You can't run. But I put that aside. I had to focus on the now. So I worked and I thought on how to fix my stalker problem for good. Yeah, I thought and thought and thought. Finally, inevitably, my train of thought moved to my stalker and how familiar he looked. He did look familiar from the glimpse I got of him. There was something about him, his hair, and the shape of his face. Then it hit me. When Ryan and I were in bed some time back, and he asked me about the route I went down once when walking home. That was a route I invented to dodge my stalker. I'd never told anyone about it. How could Ryan know about it? That dawning realization, it shattered me. Thinking it all through, I started to get suspicious. Very, very suspicious. Then I thought of something else. Immediately, I got up off my couch and moved over to my Superman statuette. I picked it up and began to closely examine it. Finally, I found a seam in the leg. Grabbing a butter knife from the kitchen, I pried the seam open just a tad, just a tiny little bit. I saw a wire running through it. That was impossible. These statuettes had nothing electronic in them. I knew because I'd read up on them on the internet because I'd wanted to buy myself one. Prying the toy open a bit more, I saw it. A tiny circular piece of metal, the size of a dime, with a tiny square circuit board lodged on it. A bug. I immediately closed up the toy, put it back on my TV stand, and, my heart pounding so hard, moved back to my couch, sitting down. I had to calm myself down to keep from panicking because now this was real. Son of a bitch, it all made sense. Me meeting Ryan mere weeks after my first encounter with my stalker in the park, him knowing my route, him being too good to be true. As I thought about this, the night it occurred to me, I got up and I started to pace. I paced back and forth, and within 10 minutes I was sobbing. I was sobbing so goddamned hard and I couldn't stop. Of course, it all made sense. It was him all along. It had to be. God damn it, I had come out here to the city. I was built, made by my family to survive. I was made by my family to survive out here, and I let this happen to me. I let this creep up on me, and I was wrong. I thought I could be close to people. I thought I could form connections, intimate connections. I couldn't, though. I couldn't. I got over it, though. I did. I stopped crying, and I hardened the hell up. I hardened up, and I made a plan. Then I dedicated myself to following it through. The next day, I didn't answer Ryan's calls. I decided I'd tell him I was sick and in bed, and so I wasn't able to talk that day. The next weekend, I was having dinner with Ryan at an extremely swanky restaurant he'd taken me out to. He was wearing a nice, sleek suit that he'd bought just for the occasion, even though he couldn't really afford it. He was really dorky that way, lovably so. At least that's what I thought before I'd figured out his whole game. I was wearing a nice red dress, one that hugged my slim figure and accentuated my auburn hair. "So," Ryan said, cutting into his steak, "what would you say about New York?" "New York?" I asked, raising my eyebrows as I sipped my wine. Looking at him, I wondered what happened to him in his life to turn him into such a liar. He cracked a grin that looked so fucking fake at the time, knowing what I knew then, and continued. "Well, see, I've been saving up for a trip to the Big Apple for years, and I'd love for you to come with me. I think you'd get a lot out of it, especially from seeing the New York Public Library." He then took a big bite out of his steak and was smiling broadly, his mouth closed as he chewed on it. Looking at him, smiling at me like that, lying to me. I hated him. I hated him and wondered what he'd look like laying in front of me. His neck snapped. Of course, I didn't show that I was thinking that. I lit up my face. "I'd love that, Ryan." My voice was exuberant, full of life. "Okay," I said, my voice getting playfully firm. "Let's get down to business. We need to hammer out details. When should we go exactly?" Ryan laughed out loud, almost choking on his meat. "Whoa, slow down, slow down." He put his hand up, chuckling. "I figure we'll see what time we can get off next year, and then we'll go from there." At this, he reached out and clasped my hands in his, looking into my eyes. "Rachel Norris, I love you, and I cannot wait to explore the greatest city in the world with you." Then he lifted my hands and kissed them, his eyes still locked on mine. I smiled back, but as I did so, I was wondering things like how I could best neutralize him when the time came. I got home that night, and I knew the time had pretty much arrived. For the past week, I'd been altering my route, but I was continually being followed, continually trailed. Sometimes I saw my stalker, Ryan, sometimes I saw Ryan. Other times I didn't. I caught him, though. I caught him at just the right time. He was walking down an alleyway and looking around all puzzled, wondering where I'd disappeared to. He never saw me coming. He never saw me shoot out from behind him faster than any other person could move and slam the black bag down over his head. He never had a chance as I got him in the sleeper hold and felt his mad, rabid struggles very quickly ebb down into nothing. Picking him up over my shoulder and feeling his big metallic watch bang slightly against my back, I headed home. I moved through the alleyways, staying out of sight, and finally made it. Slamming my door shut behind me, I dropped the guy onto the floor. I got his stuff of him, the usual. His gun, badge, cell phone, all that stuff. Then I noticed something. His watch. It was big and it was gold, just like the clerk back at the comic shop. The one that Ryan had later told me he was close friends with, ever since the clerk had started working there. So that's what his cover was. Turning the unconscious man over and ripping his hat off, it was clear to me it wasn't Ryan, it was indeed the clerk, of course. The Superman toy as a listening device, coincidentally sold from his very comic store. Of fucking course. I wanted to break down crying for how horribly I'd treated Ryan in my mind. My man, my baby, and I thought he was some sort of horrible traitor. I didn't want to think about it. I again focused on the now. I didn't waste time. I reached down, gripped the clerk's neck, and in the next few seconds made sure he'd never be a danger to me again. Then he came in. Ryan came in. I only noticed him because I heard him gasp and drop his keys. The keys I'd given him to my place 2 weeks ago. Behind me. I stood up with a start and whirled around, my eyes going wide as I saw him. "Ryan," I shot out, I can explain." My voice was quick, panicked, anxious, scared. His eyes were wide with horror, fear, shock. "Rachel? What the fuck is going on? Did you kill that guy?" I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Everything was coming down around me. "You can't run," my mother told me all those years ago. Her words playing over and over again in my head. Before I could answer, he walked over to the body and slowly reached down and picked up my stalker's badge. His police badge. Ryan looked up at me, looking into my eyes, the eyes he'd loved so much before. The eyes which tears were streaming out of now, and I could see. I could see in his eyes. There was no love anymore. No more trust. He didn't know me. "Ryan," I croaked through my tears. "Please. Stay the hell away from me," he said, quickly, quietly, cutting me off as he backed away. That was when I knew. I knew it was over. My relationship, the first most true one I'd ever had, was over. And so was my time here. "You can't run," my mother told me. "You can't run from what you are." I remember those words, her telling me through her mandibles, her 23 eyes gazing down at me lovingly but sadly. My father standing next to her, his 6 gray fuzzed legs stomping around restlessly as he beat his upper limbs against his thick, dark brown carapace. I was crying as I decided what to do. I was crying as I leapt forward, faster than any human could ever move, and slammed the door shut. I was crying as I turned and started the transformation, and though I wasn't crying when I pinned Ryan to the floor and began to eat him, because I couldn't cry in that form, I wept inside. I did. More than I could have imagined I ever would. It was a simple matter, getting out of town. 3 days later, after a hell of a lot of plane and train rides, I was in Central Europe, where I am now. I'm in a part of it that's nice, a part that reminds me of home. Home, where my family and my people and I would race through the forests and the fields in the dead of night, feasting on whatever animals we could find, but hungry, always hungry. Always hungry because animals could never compare to human meat. The hunger that drove me to the cities, to the human world, away from my people. And you know what? I'm still here. I'm still going to live here, amongst human beings. Because this is the life I've chosen, and I'll be damned if tragedy or an overzealous police hunt for me is going to cause me to throw it all away. I'll keep finding food, and I'll cover my tracks better this time. Because it's what I was always meant for. Life is weird. It brings so much joy, but also so much sorrow. I know now that I can't ever get close to anyone. All my connections, all my friendships, they all have to be fake, false, not real. It's hard, and I know there'll be times where I'm not sure if I can bear it. I chose this life, though, and you know what? In the end, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't trade it for the world. When I was 24, my older brother died. At the time, I was working as a customer support guy at a major internet service provider on the Canadian West Coast. That was my standby thing while I tried to figure out what I wanted to really do in my life. At that time, I had no idea what would enter into my life, both through my brother's death or the wires. I'd gotten home that night, made dinner, and was relaxing with some of Netflix's crime documentaries when I got the knock on the door. It was two police officers with the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, our national police service. One of the officers was an older black woman with frizzy hair that was tied back, and the other was an Asian man that looked to be about early 20s and with a shaved head. My brow furrowing with confusion, I listened as the older female officer asked if I was Robert Fellows, brother of John Fellows, and I nodded that yes, I was. "Officer, what is this about? Has something happened to John?" I asked. I was getting worried, and it clearly bled into my voice because I saw the reaction in the officer's face. It looked pained, like she had something to say but didn't know how to say it. I glanced at her partner, same deal with him. In the few brief moments before she spoke again, I felt my heart drop within me. Something had happened, and whatever it was bad. "Mr. Fellows, I think we should sit down. Can we come in?" I nodded silently and numbly walked them into the living room and sat down on the couch while they pulled up some chairs and sat in front of me. It had happened about 3 hours ago. John was heading home from the office where he worked as a human resources manager. The way they described it, I could picture it so vividly in my mind because it was part of his usual routine. John would be driving home in his Mazda, humming along with the show tunes MP3s playing from his phone on the dashboard. Then, once he got home, he'd quickly change into his casual clothes and head out to see a movie. That was something he loved doing, both by himself and with me. He was a massive film buff, just like me. Except it didn't play out that way this time. As he was nearly at the bridge leading from downtown to the rest of the city, a drunk driver came out of nowhere and slammed into the driver's side part of John's car at over 150 kilometers an hour. John died on impact. As the police described what had happened, I found myself tuning out. I found myself not caring, not really, that they had the driver in custody and were charging him for what he'd done, and that he'd likely spend decades in prison or any of that stuff. My brother was dead. That was what mattered. That was what the reality was. I finally, after what seemed like an eternity, looked up at the police officers. I could tell what my face was like based on what I saw in theirs. They looked like they were hurting by how they saw me hurting. After a moment of silence, the younger officer spoke. "There are services available for victims of crime. You can get in touch with those services by calling this number," he said, handing me a crisp-looking business card. I nodded and absent-mindedly dropped it on the couch next to me. The older officer said they would keep in touch with me about the progress of the driver's court case, and I distantly heard myself tell them that I'd appreciate that. And just like that, their visit was over. I showed them out and closed and locked the door behind them. Then I cried. I broke down crying so hard, the tears flooding down my face and my heart feeling like it wanted to shrivel up and die inside of my chest. I grasped my distorted face with my hands and let my back slam against my apartment wall. I slid down until I was slumped down on the floor. I stayed that way for the rest of the night, eventually sobbing myself into a deep sleep. In hindsight, I wish I'd have been able to get a hold of myself to notice what was happening in my house. The wires in my kitchen and living room moving of their own accord, stretching, tightening, loosening, dragging themselves toward me. I wish I had noticed that, but I didn't. John was gone. My best friend, the only one I'd had left after our parents had died when I was 16 and he was 25. We didn't have any other family. John and I, well, for my entire life, I never thought that any other pair of brothers could have been closer. I'd looked up to him all my life, and he'd looked after me my whole life. He always walked me home after school when I was young, always interested in how my day was. After I got old enough, he'd always let me tag along with him and his friends. He always had time for me and what was going on with me, and would support me in everything I felt I had to do. And when Mom and Dad died, he took care of me, moving us into an apartment and working ungodly hours every week just to provide. He was my brother, he loved me, and he was there. What more could anyone ever ask for? Even now, especially after everything that's happened. Even now, I still remember one thing he said to me when I was a teenager. It was just after we'd finished seeing our parents buried, and we were walking through the cemetery back to the car. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder and looked me in the eye and said, "Robbie, you know I'll always look after you, right?" I nodded, kind of understanding in a superficial way what he meant. It was true, though. He always did, no matter what. It's what happened after John died, though, that changed everything. It was the wires, you see. The wires so long and black and thick and thin, writhing around like a horde of snakes. Alive and hungry, always hungry. For the next month, I tried to live with my grief. It was hard, though. It was so hard. Most days I just went through the motions in this dull, numbed daze. It was like I was disconnected from myself, on the outside looking in. I didn't feel much aside from that dull, thick heartache in the core of my chest. As for my concerns, nothing mattered. Nothing was important. I didn't give a shit about movies, or trying my hand at screenwriting someday, or any of that. I didn't care about planning out my future, figuring out where I wanted to be in 10 years. Those things had occupied my mind so much until John's death. Now, they didn't. I didn't cry much after the first few days, but that was because all my tears had been spent. The damage that the tears illustrated was still there, and it was still moving. That was how it went. The hours and days and then weeks eventually bled together into this vast, endless, and indiscernible soup, and I lived my life accordingly. I was pulled into my boss's office at work about a month after John's death. "Look, son," he said, his middle-aged eyes full to the brim with barely hidden disappointment. "I understand what's happened to you has been hard, but you need to pick yourself up." I sat there, slumped in the chair, staring at him. I was wearing clothes that were unwashed and that had been slept in for the past 5 days. I was unshaved, with rough and dirty-looking stubble all over my face. I hadn't showered for 2 days. I listened to him tell me that if I needed to, I could take time off. That wasn't the only thing, though. He stressed that with me falling behind on my work in some areas and outright not meeting expectations in others, if things didn't change, it was either take the time off or get fired. I wanted to tell him what I really felt, that I didn't really give a shit if he fired me or not. I didn't, though. I mumbled that I'd take the time off, and an hour later I was back home for the first day of 2 weeks off. That night was when it all really started. I went to bed the moment I got home. I was asleep less than 15 minutes later. When I woke up, I was in pitch darkness, and tightly bound with what could only have been electrical cords. When I say electrical cords, I mean stuff like computer power cables, HDMI cables, headphone wires, that kind of thing. Wires. I blinked and tried to get my bearings. This was real, I soon figured out. I wasn't asleep. Somehow I knew it wasn't a dream. It couldn't be. I tried to move, but I couldn't because I was too tightly tied and constricted. My heart started to race as fear seeped into me, and then as that fear turned to terror. The wires, slick and smooth, roamed across my flesh, making it crawl. They tightened and loosened in perfect rhythm as if they were breathing. I felt my heart start to race and my breathing get more heavy, more frantic, until I wanted to do anything to get away, until I wanted to just scream at these things to get away. It seemed, though, that they could somehow sense what I was thinking because the speed of their travel across my skin and their tightness both immediately increased. As the pressure grew and grew, I finally screamed. In pure terror, I screamed, desperately hoping and wishing that somehow it would make a difference. Then I woke up. I shot up in bed, sweat drenching my body. I glanced around my room, my eyes shot wide open. After a few moments, I realized it was nothing. I was fine. It was just a dream. Dropping back onto my bed, I took in a deep breath and then exhaled just as deeply. Great, now I was having nightmares. Just fucking great. I rolled over and tried to get back to sleep, grumbling angrily as I did so. But I didn't get to sleep again that night. I couldn't. I didn't fully realize it until morning, but my subconscious must have. What I didn't realize was that the marks in my body that I noticed and felt with my fingertips as I lay awake in bed were grooves, the exact kind of grooves that'd be there if you were tightly bound with cord. So I lay there. I laid there and I thought of John. The next day I walked. I needed to get my mind off of John, off of the nightmare I'd had and the horrifying mystery of the grooves in my skin. So I went downtown and I just walked. I found myself strolling down through a rundown part of town, mainly abandoned. The grassy area was full of untended weeds, and sticking like a sore thumb out of the mass of weeds were abandoned, burned-out buildings. Catching sight of a particular one, a tall, block-shaped one whose face was marked equally by graffiti and burn marks, I felt intrigued. Something about it, dunno how else to describe it. As I was watching it, I noticed this stray cat, cute little thing, pure black, trotting on over to the building. I cracked a grin watching it. As I noticed it slip into the building, I decided that it might be fun to follow it, see where it's heading, that sort of thing. So, me being the person I was, I started to jog on over to the building. 10 minutes later, I was stomping through an upper-floor corridor. It turns out the building was a burnt-out hotel, an old one too, probably from the 50s. The air smelt of smoke and age, and the walls were dilapidated and broken apart. I had to be careful to watch my step, lest I fall through the ground to a quick and untimely death. As I walked, I started to wonder what the hell I was even doing here. This was stupid and dangerous. What if I fell or got hurt some other way? I was in the middle of nowhere and no one knew where I was. This was fucking ridiculous. Well, that was that. I was on the verge of leaving to go home, but then I heard it. I heard the music. It sounded like a faint but beautiful song consisting largely of buzzing. Recalling that music now, I can't help but shudder and want to lock myself in my closet. But somehow, it sounded so utterly beautiful at that moment. I found myself walking, then jogging, then running toward that music. Up a flight of stairs, through 2 apartments with broken walls to another corridor, then down another hallway. Turning down a hallway, then into an apartment. To this day, still not quite sure what I was expecting. I certainly wasn't expecting what I actually ended up seeing. What I saw was something from another world. It had to be. It was a writhing, endless mass of wires. All black, all connected, and all entangled. Entangled so much that an army could never hope to untangle them all, even if they had 100 years. The wires pulsated as they loosened and tightened. They even got thicker and thinner, like snakes do when they breathe. I stood there, frozen as the perfect memory of my nightmare floated into my conscious awareness, and as my mind took that into account and tried to somehow make sense of what I was seeing. As I stared at them, it clicked what they all reminded me of. A horde of snakes. A giant mass of black, electric snakes. Staring at those things, I felt dread creep into my heart. This was wrong. Against nature, even. This shouldn't exist. As that realization seeped into my mind, panic rose within me. My heart began to race again, and I felt sweat begin to drip down my forehead, as a mad, desperate, overwhelming desire to just run began to consume me. Finally, I acted on that desire. I swung around and took off at a run toward the door. Except it was no longer there. Where it was a wall of wires moving and breathing, as it were, with their loosening and tightening and thickening and thinning. It finally clicked. This wasn't the apartment building, it was somewhere else, somewhere different. I felt trapped, constrained, separated from everything and everyone I knew. I felt rise within me a desperate panic. What was I going to do? How could I survive this? After a few brief moments, I couldn't help it anymore. I screamed in a mad panic. At that moment, I think I got its attention because immediately they shot out and wrapped themselves around me, drawing me into the mass. Panic overwhelmed me and I began to fight and thrash about mindlessly, my heart slamming into my chest over and over and over again. I felt tears run down my face, and sweat streamed down my forehead as the living wires coiled around me and sucked me in deeper and deeper into their mass. Their grip on my body grew tighter and tighter every moment, even to the point where I knew if they got any tighter, my bones would snap. That wasn't the most horrible part, though. They were alive, almost as if they were this massive set of snake-like animals. The wires felt smooth and slick as they traversed across my skin, and as they tightened around my arms and legs and face and throat. I tried to control my breathing, but I couldn't. I was panicking so much I was hyperventilating. As I thrashed and fought, I heard myself sobbing vigorously. I felt so helpless, and I did feel like I was going to die there. Then I heard it. It came into my ears as I felt that presence from my nightmare approach. It was whispering, of a voice that couldn't be human, and in a language that no human mouth or tongue could ever hope to pronounce even a word of. But it was there in my ear, speaking to me. What it said to me, to this day, makes my blood run cold. What it said to me, whispering closely, so closely, as if it were a lover whose mouth was mere millimeters away from my ear, was, "You can come to be with us, and there you can join our mass." I screamed wildly, completely out of control as raw terror overtook me. All I could think before I blacked out was, "John, I love you." You can imagine that it was the surprise of my life when I woke up in my bed. It was evening, and for some reason I was thinking of John. Somehow he was stuck in my mind, the way he'd be when we'd parted ways after an evening of socializing with each other. It was odd, but I didn't concern myself with it because I had more pressing issues, obviously. I glanced around frantically, wondering what the fuck was going on. It couldn't have been another nightmare because I was still dressed in the clothes I wore out that day. I jumped out of bed and moved over to the window, pulling the blinds open. It was dark out, the night lit up by the city lights and the moon in the sky. Okay, it was night, great. I wasn't going to stick around to admire it all, though. Something was happening, something horrible. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I had to get out. I decided I'd leave the city, move up north into the woods, then figure out what to do next. The woods where there'd be no fucking cords or wires. An hour later, I was packing my bags, and I was finally ready to leave. I packed in the bathroom because I didn't want any of the wires in my apartment to see me get ready. I know, that sounds batshit crazy, but can you blame me after what I'd been through? Like I said, I had no idea what was going on. My heart was pounding furiously, powered by raw fear and anxiety, as I tried to plan out how I'd survive all of this. Why was this happening to me? What was this living mass? All sorts of questions running through my head. In the end, I silenced all of the questions and got back to packing, hoping that since I was in the bathroom, I'd be able to just slip out. It was no good, though. I was so focused on packing, so focused on getting out, that I wasn't thinking coherently. If I had, I'd have known to have thoroughly checked my bathroom, and if I'd done that, I'd have noticed a thin charger cord for my electric razor peeking out of the bottom bathroom cupboard. The wires got to me just as I was walking to my apartment door with my backpack slung around a shoulder. First, it was my phone cord that shot out and wrapped itself around my ankle. Then my computer cords somehow made way longer. And my phone cords and my TV cords shot out of their respective rooms to entangle themselves around my arms and body. I immediately began to fight wildly in a terrified frenzy, hoping against hope that I could get the hell away from these things and survive. I needed to get out. I needed to free myself. And the more time passed where I didn't, the more panic consumed me. As I did, I heard the whisper of the presence from the wires in my ear. The mass, you will join our mass. It got louder and louder and closer as I struggled. As I struggled, more wires, coming seemingly from nowhere, shot out to wrap themselves around me. Soon I was on the ground and covered from head to toe in wires that were tightening so much. It felt like pure hell, like I was in the grip of some monster from a campfire story. I didn't know what these things were, and I didn't know how to fight them. The more I struggled, the more they overpowered me. I had no idea what to do, and that only fueled my panic. In the midst of my fear, my breathing heavy and rapid and my bones feeling like they were about to snap from the grip of the cords, that's when I noticed it. My surroundings were starting to blur and shift and change. Where my apartment walls were seemed to flicker, and in between the flickering I saw a brightly lit yet dark mass of writhing snake-like wires. At this point I was going on pure animal instinct, fighting like mad while sobbing viciously. Thoughts of being consumed by this thing filling my mind and paralyzing me with dread. Then my God, my Savior, my amazing, wonderful Savior spoke to me. "Robbie," John's voice spoke to me from the deepest reaches of eternity. "You know I'll always look after you, right?" Something happened then. The all-too-close whisper of the wires turned into a terrified and agonized shriek. I closed my eyes in pain because of the shrill closeness of the shriek to my ears. It was because of the pain that I didn't notice the wires rapidly uncoiling from me and withdrawing from me. By the time I really came to and opened my eyes, there were no wires anymore. At least none where they shouldn't be. I saw him too. Shakily pulling myself up to my feet, I saw him standing in front of me, just as if he had never died. Just as if he had come over to watch a movie with me. He was smiling softly, with warmth in his eyes. "Don't worry about the mass," John said softly. "They won't come after you anymore. I won't let them. I love you, you know." I wanted to respond. I wanted to run to hug him. I wanted to do a million things, but I couldn't on account of me blacking out immediately after he spoke to me. What's the rest of the story? I woke up the next day in bed feeling warm and safe. I went into work the next day with clean, freshly ironed clothes and a strong work ethic. I felt like $1 million, and I acted like it too. Life was back on track and my grief was gone too. I loved my brother and he loved me. Even now. Even after what had happened, that was 5 years ago. I finally got my life back on track and got into screenwriting, an old dream of mine. Now I'm part of the writing staff for a small league Canadian medical drama. Not anything huge, but it pays the bills. Life is good for the most part. I've even met a special someone who I hope will end up my wife sometime in the next few years. But still, I still dream about them. About the mass, the wires. I still dream about them, and in those dreams, the whispers come to me. They whisper that it won't last, that someday they'll have me. Something else has happened recently that I find troubling. At various points, I find it hard to think of my brother. At times, crazily, I can't even remember what his face looked like. At those moments, I feel a wave of terror and vulnerability wash over me, and I think of the wires. Wherever they are, I think of them still writhing and sliding over each other in a gigantic uniform mass. I try not to believe the wires. I try not to. Alyssa and I loved each other deeply. No, not that way, we were only just friends. But we were close enough that we were basically brother and sister. Where did we begin? Well, I'd known her for as long as I could remember. I vaguely remember being 6 and thinking that, because we were so close, we were going to get married one day. Typical kid logic, right? But as we grew, we become even closer. And as we went through elementary school, then middle school, then high school, and then university, it was always Alyssa and Jeff. Jeff and Alyssa, always. I remember coaching her on how to ask out her crush when we were 13, or the time we ended up running across a bunch of backyards in the middle of the night after our very first party got crashed by the cops at 16, or how I was there for her when she gave up her baby for adoption when we were 19, because the father was a deadbeat who refused to acknowledge that it was his, and she didn't think she could raise a child alone. That was rough on her, real rough, but I helped see her through it. Something she said to me then stands out to me even now. "Jeff," she said, as we both sat on her bed, her wiping the tears away from her red and puffy eyes, "we really lucked out finding each other, didn't we?" We did. We really did. But I try not to think about her, to be honest. I try not to because it hurts too much. I have to go back to when everything started to unravel. It all started when we were just out of university. I was 24, and so was Alyssa. I was working as an office drone in downtown Vancouver. Basic data entry bullshit. She, on the other hand, was a budding journalist. She'd been published in various papers and magazines, but she hadn't found sustainable, full-time work. Yet, she would eventually. I knew she would. She was just that good. It was inevitable that someone would notice her skill. It was just that skill which got us into the whole mess to begin with. It was one warm, sunny July day about 7 years ago. I had just gotten out of work and was on my way to a dinner date with Alyssa. She really wanted to meet with me. There was something she was mega excited about. As I walked there, I was wondering about stuff, mainly my future, and the nature of my friendship with Alyssa. I mean, having graduated with a degree in history and with barely any work experience at all, I didn't have many career prospects. Hence my working as an office drone and wondering where I'd be 10 years down the road. But I did have one hope. But it was a long shot. Writing. See, I loved writing fiction and I did think I was pretty good at it. But I knew fully that it took a hell of a lot of luck, hard work, and knowing the right people to make it in that industry. Still, I was willing to try. And then there was Alyssa. I was starting to feel more warm toward her, but I didn't know what that meant. Was I falling in love with her? Did I want to be in love with her even if that shift was happening inside of me? She was my closest friend, and that relationship had served us well our entire lives. Would stepping forward into romance risk throwing all that away? Thinking about all this, yeah, a total mess. Anyways, I finally got to the diner. I stepped inside, peering around. I'd never been there before, but it was one of Alyssa's favorites. It looked kind of run down, but in a cozy kind of way. The wallpaper was peeling, there were scuff and scrape marks all over the floor, and a couple light bulbs kept flickering, but somehow this felt like the kind of place you could have a deep, intense conversation in. Scanning the inside of the place with my eyes, I spotted Alyssa sitting at a table, intensely focused on an open file full of papers in front of her. Idly looking up, she spotted me, and her eyes lit up in excitement as she waved me over. As I settled into the diner booth across from her, I was curious about why she'd called me here. She sounded excited as hell when she talked to me on the phone as I was getting off work. I figured it had to do with something she was investigating. She always shared her big scoops with me whenever she found them, so I figured that had to be it. As it happened, I was right. "Jeff!" she exclaimed, her voice bubbly and energetic. "You won't believe the lead I'm on." From the way her voice sounded and the look of her eyes, I could tell this was serious business. "All right," I asked slowly. "What is it?" A wide grin appeared on her face. "First," she said, holding up a finger, "you know all about the people going missing lately, yeah? I should explain. Back then, There was a rash of folks going missing. Some here, some there, from various parts of life. Not really enough to form a pattern, at least outside of the minds of dedicated folks like Alyssa, and not really enough to set off a citywide police operation, but enough. I'd mainly heard about it from Alyssa, oddly enough. "Yes, Alyssa," I said, cracking a smile. "I do remember you telling me all about it for the past month." Nodding excitedly, she continued. "Good. So, long story short, I have a lead on who could be behind it all." My eyes went wide. If she was actually onto something legitimate here, this could break the whole matter wide open. It'd be big. Not even making her career big, but big as in taking down a serial killer the police didn't even know about big. Now I was interested. "All right, tell me more," I said, leaning in. Pushing her papers toward me, she started going through them. "All right, so basically people are going missing, right? Well, I've been tracking who's gone missing and what their usual routines and travel patterns in the city are. That information, combined with the network of homeless informants I have..." "Wait, you have a network of homeless informants?" I asked. Cutting her off, my eyebrows raised in an expression of surprise. She looked surprised. "Yeah, totally. You help them, they're willing to help you. Works well for both of us." I shrugged and motioned for her to continue. "Anyways, yeah, a network of homeless informants. They've been giving me information on when they've actually seen the people get grabbed." "Wait," I cut in. "They actually witnessed the abductions? Alyssa, you and them have to go to the cops with this." Leaning in, she spoke urgently. "We did. Only the police wouldn't believe a word we said. Look, just let me finish, okay?" I nodded, and she continued. "It's what they actually saw when they saw the people get grabbed. Now let me tell you, I didn't believe it at first. But every person in my network who saw something, and these are people from across the city, who don't even know the other people who witnessed stuff, says the same thing." She paused, took a deep breath, and finally dropped the bombshell she was holding back. They saw these people hanging around darkened spaces like alleyways or building alcoves, stuff like that. Always at night. And then they saw these little machines, mechanical creatures. Machine elves, one of my informants called them. Little mechanical dwarf figures with these sharp, pointed ears. My eyes must have shown that this sounded crazy as hell because she started to speak more quickly, trying to hold my attention. They saw them basically swarm the people in question, render them unconscious somehow, and then drag them away. I leaned back and tried to figure out how to break it to her. This wasn't real. She was being bullshitted. Or maybe not. Maybe the people telling her this actually did believe they saw that. But come on. It couldn't be real. It couldn't be. "Alyssa," I said carefully, "look, this can't be real. I mean..." She cut me off. "Jeff, listen, I know it sounds crazy, but it's worth some digging, don't you think?" I was stuck. Slowly shrugging and figuring it'd be a way to get her off this track, I went, "Yeah, but..." "Great," she shot out brightly, cutting me off again. "Then you'll come with me to their hideout tonight?" My eyes shot open wide. What the fuck? First off, she wanted me to come follow her on this wild goose chase. Secondly, she found their fucking hideout? Wow, I started to stutter out. She took my confusion as an opportunity and said, "Great." "It's agreed then. Come on, I'll lead the way." And with that, she had taken her papers, put them into her messenger bag, and was up and heading out the door. I was left sitting there, really wanting to tell her, no, we weren't going to go there together, this is crazy, and I'm going home. I wanted to do that. What actually happened was me muttering angrily under my breath as I got up and followed her out the door, and then proceeded to follow her to wherever it was that she was leading me. It took us an hour to get there. First, we transited near the place, then we walked the rest of the way. She ended up leading me to an abandoned warehouse deep in the city. She led me to a back door, and I was just wishing I'd been strong enough to stand up for myself and go home. But I couldn't. I felt loyal to her, like I had to see this through with her. Trying the door, she found, to my surprise, that it was unlocked. She pushed it open and flashlight pulled out and switched on, stepped inside, with me following her. What we saw there will haunt me forever. It was a horror show. Blood streaks all over the walls and floors. Not only that, but dismembered body parts. Arms, legs, hands, feet, chunks of flesh and gore. Just littered all over the floor. The place stunk with the smell of blood and rotting flesh. I brought my hand up to my face, trying to stop myself from vomiting at the horror of it all. I glanced over at Alyssa, and her reaction was the same. This was it. This was where I'm going to make my stand. I thought to myself. Alyssa, I whispered urgently, we should go. We should really go and let the police handle this. Her response surprised me. No, we need to go deeper, really get evidence that these machine elves exist. Her tone was firm and resolute. Before I could argue, she headed off deeper into the warehouse. Well, what do you think I did? I followed. As we ventured deeper into the warehouse, I noticed that the air kept getting warmer and warmer as we went further in. There was also an odd glow coming from deep in the warehouse. We also heard the sound of metallic movement and scraping, which got louder and louder the deeper in we got. Finally, we approached a slightly ajar door, which had a bright light shining behind it, the air thick with the heat radiating from the room ahead. My heart pounding and my blood pumping, and terror and tension rushing through me, Alyssa and I peered through the crack in the door. What we saw still makes my blood run cold. It was a wide open space with the floor covered in fresh blood. The lights were on, casting a dull glow over all that was happening. Littered across the floor were fresh corpses in various states of dismemberment, limbs and even organs replaced with mechanical parts that crudely resembled what had been removed. That wasn't what made my heart freeze, though. What made that happen were the mechanical beings operating on the bodies. They were made up of various plates and sheets of metal, sharp corners and edges all over their metallic bodies. They were the size of dwarves, think Santa's elves, and their ears were sharp and pointed. How the hell could they be moving? How the hell could they be alive? They weren't robots, because every now and then we got a glimpse of their insides through the gaps between the metal. There were none. No interior materials. They were literally just a bunch of metal stuck together, and yet they were alive? This didn't make any damn sense. The blood covering the floor reeked to high heaven. I don't know if I can properly convey the horror of all this. All these bodies just laying there, cut wide open in pools of their own blood. The mechanical elves drilling crude metal arms into the shoulders of the corpses, where the arms had been amputated. Gently putting a crude metal fashioning of a heart into the chest cavity where a real heart had just been. All the bodies. These things just cutting and slicing arms off and cutting out hearts and stomachs and then putting in crude mechanical limbs and organs. It just... Fucking Christ, it was insane. I glanced over at Alyssa as we witnessed this. Her eyes were shot wide with terror and fascination, and her mouth had dropped open completely. As we watched, I noticed her finally fumble to get her phone out to snap photos of these things. But as she fumbled, the phone fell out of her hand. With us desperately grasping for it, it hit the ground with a loud clatter. Inside the room, the machine beings stopped everything they were doing and quickly swerved their heads in our direction. Alyssa and I froze. For a couple brief moments, the two of us and all of them were frozen, staring directly at each other. Then a bunch of the mechanical elves, I don't know what else to call them, started to race toward us. Fight or flight kicked in, and Alyssa and I took off running. We raced through the warehouse, desperately trying to make it outside. We could hear, practically feel, the elves behind us in hot pursuit. Every time I gave a quick glance behind us, they were closer. Just the noise they were making, clank, 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 getting closer and closer. Our fear shooting higher and higher the nearer they drew to us. Finally, before we knew it, we burst out into the cool night air and took off running toward the closest SkyTrain station. We ran and ran and ran and didn't stop until we had been running outside for a good 10 minutes. Slowing to a stop outside a closed storefront and leaning against the window, panting hard in a desperate attempt to catch our breaths, we glanced at each other. Alyssa's eyes were filled with terror. We both knew that she never expected this. I thought that maybe she never even expected her hunch to actually pan out. Maybe to her it was just a kind of game, like playing investigative reporter, only now it was all too horrifyingly real. Long story short, we made it to a SkyTrain station and headed straight to the nearest open police station. We told everything to the interviewing officer. Of course, she didn't believe a word she said, but we managed to prevail on her to send a couple officers to investigate. We never expected what happened next. We were sitting in the office trying to calm our nerves, which were still rattled. And then the officer who had interviewed us earlier burst in. She looked pissed. "What the hell kind of game do you two think you're playing?" she asked in an accusatory fashion, an angry edge to her voice. We just looked at her, then at ourselves, then at her, unsure of what to say. In our silence, she continued. "We searched the entire building. Not a sign of anything out of order. No bloodstains, no body parts, and sure as fuck no goddamned mechanical elves." She yelled the last part. In the end, she ended up telling us that against her better judgment, she wasn't going to charge us for wasting police time, but that if she ever saw either of us again in cases where we weren't reporting actual real-life crimes, we'd regret it. Then she kicked us out of the building. Alyssa and I numbly parted ways and headed to our respective homes. Neither of us really knew what to think. What the hell was that back there? What the hell happened? But what else to do? I got home and went to bed, but not before calling Alyssa to make sure she made it home all right. We didn't talk much on the phone, just checking in with each other. Sleep came fast that night. I got up in the morning, went to work, and tried to forget what had happened. I mean, you may think that's crazy. How could I just go back to living my life, seeing what I'd seen? But witnessing something like that, it does something to you. You don't try to attack it head-on or even solve it, really. You just try to go back to life and forget it exists. It wasn't like that with Alyssa, though. She wouldn't let herself forget it all. On my way home from work, I got a call on my cell phone. It was her. I picked it up. "Alyssa?" I asked. "Hey, Jeff?" she asked back. Her voice was small, hesitant. I could tell she was still impacted by what had happened last night. After a moment of silence from both of us, she continued. "Jeff, we have to get to the bottom of what happened." I blew up at this. I still don't know why. I guess everything that had happened, all the stress and fear it built up in me, just burst forth. No fucking way," I yelled into the phone. Alyssa didn't respond, so I continued. "You dragged me out there when I didn't even want to fucking go, and then we see all this horrible stuff. And we just barely get away, and now you want to go and kick the nest again? No, count me out. Count me the fuck out." She was silent for a long time. Then she spoke very quietly. "Okay, all right, I'll figure it out myself. Goodbye, Jeff." Then she hung up. I didn't hear from her for a long time after that. I didn't see her either. As it stood, I didn't care. Something about what we saw there, what nearly happened to us, I'm just gonna be honest, it scared me. It scared the living shit out of me, and I wanted nothing more than to put it behind me, pretend it didn't exist, and pray those things didn't find me. If doing that cost me my friendship with Alyssa, so be it. So I went to work, and I finally decided to pursue my dream of writing. I started to send stories off to magazines and anthologies. About a month later, I'd received word that one had been accepted into a major genre fiction magazine. That was about a day before Alyssa re-established contact with me. I was at home on my day off, watching a movie I'd gotten from the library late in the evening. I was really relaxed, calm, and happy. It hadn't occurred to me at the time, but not only had I put what I witnessed behind me, I had put Alyssa behind me as well. So I encountered mixed feelings, to put it mildly, when I noticed her name on my ringing smartphone. Slowly, hesitantly, I answered the phone and put it to my ear. I heard Alyssa's hesitant, careful voice speak from the other end. "Jeff?" "Hey, Alyssa," I said politely, trying to keep things level. I didn't know how to really conduct things, not after what had happened and not after we'd been out of contact for so long. "Jeff, look, I need to say something." "Okay," I said simply, waiting for her to continue. "I'm sorry for everything that happened. I shouldn't have dragged you into it, and I know you were really in over your head. I mean, Jesus, so was I. And I'm sorry for that." She paused, then she continued. "But I need to see this through. I've tracked these mechanical things back to their hideout. I'm ending this tonight. You can come with me if you want. I hope you do. But one way or another, this ends." I started to protest, but she cut me off. "I'll text you the address, bye." I sat there stunned. So this was it, huh? As I thought on this, my phone dinged and I glanced at it. There it was, the address of the building. But something odd happened. I found myself actually debating on whether or not I should go. After how I was nearly murdered by those things, I was actually considering going up against them again. It was crazy, insane. But I couldn't leave Alyssa to go up against them alone. I mean, for God's sake, she was my friend, my best friend. I went back and forth on it for the next half hour, but in the end there was no real choice. I tried to get there on transit. Unfortunately, a medical emergency at one of the stations delayed the train for about 40 minutes. It would turn out to be a fateful turn of events. I made it there close to midnight. It was a different warehouse on the other end of the city, but as I approached, I could vaguely hear the mechanical movements inside. I ventured inside, the heat and raw stench of blood hitting me. As I ventured deeper into the warehouse, close to the door of the room where these things were based, I noticed what Alyssa had brought, homemade explosives. Big ones, and lots of them too. Enough to take down this entire building. But if the explosives were here, where was she? My heart racing, I gently and carefully opened the door to the room where the mechanical elves were located and peeked inside. What I saw, it shattered me. All the bodies being operated on, but not just that. I saw Alyssa, dead, laying on the floor, her stomach cut wide open as the mechanical elves carefully removed her heart, stomach, and lungs. Setting her organs down on the floor, they gently put crude mechanical facsimiles of her organs where her actual organs had been. She was just fucking lying there, her eyes all glassy and lifeless. Everything she'd ever been, everything I knew her to be, fucking gone, because of these little fucking bastards. I was numb when I gently closed the door. I was numb when I walked over to the explosives and set the timer. I was numb as I took off running out of the warehouse and down the street, and I was numb when the warehouse went up in a massive ball of flame after I was 2 blocks away. The police ended up investigating me for the warehouse explosion and Alyssa's disappearance, but in the end they couldn't dig up any clear evidence, so I was left alone. In the end I moved to Toronto. I couldn't stay in Vancouver. Too many memories. I did end up pursuing my dream. As of now, I have 2 novels out, with a 3rd on the way. One of them's won a number of awards. But even now, with my life so radically different and changed, I've never forgotten, and I will never forget Alyssa. Most of all, I will never, ever forget those mechanical things. Even now, I still dream of them. Lots of people remember their first time. For some, it's utterly amazing. Others so horrible and embarrassing that they'd rather not think about it, and everywhere in between for a lot of others. But you do remember it. Mine? I'll never forget mine. I can't. Not with what it led to. I was 19, attending university on the Canadian West Coast. I'd rather not say which one, but I'll give you some hints. It's major, big, and old. I was at a party being thrown by a rich classmate of mine. He was from Hong Kong, and his dad was this big executive or something and owned a pretty decent mansion in Vancouver. The student, his name was Calvin, lived alone in it with his teenage brother and had a pretty sizable range of funds to draw from to support himself. So, I'm at the party, right? Trying to avoid Calvin noticing me. Yeah, that's another thing. See, I wasn't actually invited to this thing. Back then, I was an incredibly awkward person. I just didn't click with others. I'd try my best to socialize, make friends, and people would be nice back. Yeah, but they wouldn't really put any effort into me. I wasn't worth it, apparently. But I did want to change that. I really did. So when I overheard Calvin give the address and time for the party after I got out of our history course, well, I made it a point to show up there. Anyways, I'm at the party sipping on my beer and trying not to stand out. I was watching everyone around me and they seemed so happy. Peaceful, like all this was second nature to them. But I felt out of place, like I didn't belong. What are you even doing here? I was thinking to myself. This isn't your scene. Just go home and spend the night playing some Call of Duty like you know you want to. Finally, I decided to do just that. So I set my beer down on a shelf nearby and started to make my way toward the door. And that's when she stopped me. She stepped out right in front of me, short with long raven dark hair, framing a round pretty face, dark green eyes. She was wearing this polka dot dress with a leather jacket over it. Frowning, she reached out and touched my arm. "You're not leaving so soon, are you?" she asked, concern in her voice. Trying to play it cool, I shrugged and looked around. "Yeah," I said all casually. "This isn't really my scene." "Oh, nonsense," she said, smiling. "Come on, you'll have a good time. You just need to give it a chance." Motioning to the couch in the living room, she said, "Come on, sit with me. We'll see where the night takes us." You need to understand why I did what I did. Here was a pretty girl expressing some sort of interest in me, and who knows, maybe she was right. Maybe I just did need to give it a chance. Now, of course, I wish I'd just blown her off and kept on toward the front door. But we can't change what's happened, so I'm sitting on the couch next to this Missy. That's what she told me her name was. We were chatting, just making small talk. "So, what's your goals in life?" she asked, smiling softly. I laughed. "God, leading into the big questions, huh?" She laughed back. "I think it's best to get to the core of who a person is first. Waste less time that way." "Well," I said, looking up and searching my mind, "I don't know. I'd love to write. be a journalist and a novelist. It's what I'm passionate about, I guess. I was being as honest as I could be. I was passionate about writing, always had been and still am to an extent. Maybe by now I'd have made it somewhere with that, if circumstance hadn't changed my path. "Ooh, the mysterious writer," she said, grinning wickedly. "What would you like to write about in terms of both fiction and journalism?" "Oh," I replied. "Well, I'm into labor advocacy and grassroots activism. Maybe aim to write for a progressive magazine of some sort. Maybe an outright socialist one. In terms of fiction." I searched my brain. Something meaningful. What it means to be human, the human condition. She nodded, taking it all in. As she did so, I leaned into the couch more and spoke up. "Now tell me about yourself." Her facial expression shifted to one of surprise. "Me?" Then she laughed. "Oh, I'm nothing interesting." I cracked a grin. "I find that very hard to believe. What are you doing in Vancouver?" She laughed. "Just wandering, I guess." She paused, then continued. "I came here from Los Angeles. I'm searching, I guess. Just trying to find what I'm meant for. On an adventure, I guess." At that, she cracked a grin and giggled. "That is so interesting," I said, really taken in by this person. She looked around, then back at me. "You want to get out of here?" I blinked. Was this going to lead to what I think it was going to lead to? What the hell, I thought to myself, I might as well go for it. I mean, when will I ever fall into a situation like this again? I nodded and said that that'd be cool. So, we got up, got our stuff, and headed out. An hour later, I was back at my studio apartment downtown, pressed up against the wall with her kissing me and trying to get my shirt off. Now I have to describe what this was like for me. I was excited as hell, yeah, but I was also extremely nervous. I mean, I'd never been with a woman before. What if I was so horrible that she laughed her ass off at me and told me to get out? So I pushed her off me slightly and started to explain. "Look, this is great and all, but I'm new to this, real new, you know?" Smiling and nodded at me, she said, "That's okay. I'll walk you through everything." Then back to kissing me and getting my clothes off. I'm not going to go into too much detail on everything else that happened, but it was really wonderful. Kind of awkward, kind of not what I was expecting, but amazing nonetheless. It's too bad that everything that happened afterwards wasn't so wonderful. That night, after I'd fallen asleep, my hand on her side, I had a dream. Well, a nightmare. I was in the square of a vast ruined city, basically any modern metropolis, but with everything shattered and broken. The sky was a dark, burnt red. But it's what I was witnessing that was so horrifying. I was in the city square, and at the center of it was this huge burning pyre. There were what looked like burned-up mannequins tied to the center of it, just burning, and surrounding the pyre were these figures yelling and cheering with what seemed to be delight. I moved closer, and what I saw, it chilled me to the bone. The mannequins burning, they were people. Their bodies were charred and burned down to the bone, and as I noticed this, the smell hit me. I brought my hand up to my mouth fast because I felt if I didn't, I'd have vomited. And that's when I got a closer look at the people cheering around the pyre. They were monsters, misshapen, with jagged claws and too many joints in their arms and legs, and skin that looked like it was boiled meat. My heart started to pound faster and harder, and panic started to rise in me. As I stared at them in sheer horror, one of the beasts, it turned around and it looked at me. That's when I woke up, in physical agony, my heart pounding its way out of my chest. As I realized it was all a dream, I calmed down and started to breathe. It was then that I noticed that Missy was gone. I was surprised and wondered if she left me any contact information, but I was distracted by other things, namely, the physical pain I was in. My stomach hurt a ton, and so did my back. I slowly moved out of bed and stood up, moving carefully to avoid triggering more pain. After walking around a bit, the pain subsided, and then after about half an hour, disappeared. I looked around my place to see if she'd left me anything. Nothing. So it was like that, huh? I tried not to feel too hurt. One-night stands are a thing with tons of people, and I suppose I should have felt grateful that she took such an interest in me to begin with, but it still stung. I really liked her, and I guess I kind of hoped that we could have had something. I know, I sound like a total idiot, right? But I didn't have much experience with women, so when one actually expressed interest in me and then sleeps with me, well, I guess I let myself get emotionally vulnerable about it. Anyways, I went back to bed and was asleep shortly thereafter. I slept peacefully. It's too bad I didn't wake up peacefully. I woke up nauseous as hell and had to run to the bathroom to vomit. I spent like 5 minutes in there, just puking into the toilet while feeling like garbage. When I was done, I realized that the pain in my stomach was back. Not only that, but I noticed these odd red bumps on my hands and abdomen. Fucking great, I thought to myself. She gave me something. How could I be so stupid to not use protection? Fucking virgin idiot. But it was still odd because I'd never heard of an STD that acted this fierce this fast. I mean, we'd only had sex, 9 hours ago? It was terrible. Just this hard, slow ache in my stomach and back, along with the feeling that I was going to vomit again any minute now. Add to that the anxiety I felt over the bumps, because what was that all about? It wasn't a good time. So naturally, in response to all this, I pulled myself together and went over to a local walk-in clinic and had myself examined. Long story short, the doctor couldn't figure out what it was I had. It was clear I had something, but it wasn't anything he'd heard of or encountered before. So he sent me for blood and urine tests and told me to drink lots of fluids, get a lot of bed rest, and to take it easy. I got the tests done and then headed home to get back to my life while I waited for the test results. At this point, I was getting so damned furious. Who the hell did this girl think she was, just infecting me with her shit like this? I mean, sure, maybe I wouldn't have slept with her if I knew she had an STD. But I did have a right to know. Anyone would, but it was done and I'd probably never see her again. So I tried to put it out of my mind. So for the rest of the day, still feeling that ache and pain all around my body, I did try to take it easy. I made myself some pasta for dinner, took a bunch of glasses of water, and tried to watch some Netflix to relax. It worked, kind of. Took my mind off everything. I finished in the evening and went to bed. As I fell asleep, I felt my back throb slightly. I thought it was just my body acting up. How stupid I was. I woke up that morning feeling slightly nauseous, but still good enough to head to class. So I went. That's where things really started to get weird. So here's how it went down. I'm sitting in Professor Henschley's lecture on how the Italian partisans operated in World War II, and I'm feeling like shit. My stomach is acting up. I'm having the most splitting headache ever, and my back is itching like a motherfucker. And then I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. I glanced over at it, and it was gone. Okay, nothing. I looked back at the professor and refocused on the lecture. Then it showed up again, with some indications of movement. I glanced over again with my eyes, and for a couple horrible seconds that seemed like an eternity, I saw it fully. In the corner of the lecture theater, it was a human figure, about 6 feet, stocky looking, that was covered, head to toe, in live cockroaches. There were so many of them that you couldn't see beneath them, just this standing mass of cockroaches. I saw it. My mind clicked as to what it was, and then almost immediately, purely in reaction, I leaned forward and puked my guts out onto the lecture hall floor. I felt this huge mix of emotions as I vomited and finished. Shame, humiliation, and fear. Rabid, panicky fear. The professor started to say something about how I was excused since I was obviously too sick to be in class. I don't remember exactly because I wasn't paying attention. I was up and running toward the doors to the lecture hall, needing to get out, my fear and panic fully in control. I raced home, slamming and locking my door behind me as I arrived. Leaning against the door, my eyes wide open in fear and my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest, I hesitantly and fearfully made my way to my bathroom. Running the water and then splashing some in my face to sort of snap me out of it, I looked into the mirror. What the hell was that? Was I going nuts? It obviously wasn't real, but now I was hallucinating. As I thought about it, I settled down a bit. Yeah, that was it. It had to be. A symptom of what I had. Hallucinations, great. It occurred to me to go to a doctor, but I realized there wouldn't be much that they could do until they knew what I had, which meant waiting for the test results to come in. So I did the only thing I really could do. I went to bed. In my sleep, I had another nightmare. I was standing on a vast desert plain, the sky a burnt red. In the distance was a city. It looked like any major western city, but it was on fire. Vast plumes of black smoke rose high into the sky, over massive streams of flame that were consuming the city. It then hit me that I could feel the heat, the strong, overwhelming burning heat, even from this distance. I turned and I saw, I don't know how to describe it, a beast, a monster, jagged claws, a misshapen body, and a mouth too big with teeth too sharp and too bloody. We made eye contact, and then I woke up, in agony. I don't remember much because of the pain. I just remember hitting the floor and feeling like my body was being torn apart from the inside out. I screamed and screamed and screamed, my voice resounding throughout my apartment. As it continued, I began to notice where the pain was the most. It was on my back. It felt like something was trying to push out, and then it happened. I felt my skin rip open and blood splashing onto the floor next to me. Something reach out. My face lying on its cheek, I saw a jagged claw connected to a burnt, red-skinned arm, the size of that of an infant. The same physical material I'd seen connected to the beast in my dream, plant itself on the ground. Then, as this thing climbed out more, another claw planted itself on the ground. As it pulled itself out more and more, I felt like every one of my organs was being ripped apart. I was screaming so hard my throat burned, and the tears ran down my face like streams of water. Finally, the beast was out of me, tumbling onto the ground. It was the size of an infant, but its razor-sharp teeth still too big for its mouth. And then, oh God, this was impossible, it started to grow. Fast. It expanded and grew, and its shape changed as it grew. Finally, it was a full-grown being, standing what looked like 6 feet tall. At this point, the pain got to me. I started to lose consciousness. As I did so, I got a brief glimpse of this thing, the very same beast I'd just seen in my dream, start to climb out my window, only as it did so, shifting in shape, shifting to a human form. I woke up the next morning, the pain gone, all of it. No more nausea, no more pain. I immediately ran to the bathroom to check myself. I was fine. I checked my naked back in the mirror, no scars, just minor dried bloodstains. You would never have guessed some monster clawed itself out of me there. I stared at myself in the mirror for a long, long time after checking myself. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I'd have to find out what happened to me, what it all meant. I dropped out of school 2 weeks later. I just couldn't expect myself to focus on something as mundane as a university education when I'd just experienced what I'd experienced. I had to support myself, though, and since I didn't have student loans to rely on anymore, that meant a job. So I got one at this major comic shop downtown. It was decent. I worked, I got paid, and I paid my bills, and every inch of free time I had at home, I devoted to learning what I could about what had happened to me. It took me 6 months, but in that time I managed to dig things up. I spent a month finding the right people on Twitter, various obscure message boards, and other nooks and crannies of the internet. Then I spent another few months getting them to trust me. Finding the information took me to a lot of places. Seattle to meet with this anarchist collective that had someone who had run into Missy a year ago. Then other places, Portland to meet a professor who had done some research into various obscure cults, and then a hacker who could get me a classified FBI report on the group Missy was a part of, and more various places and people that had info I needed. Finally, I had amassed a ton of information, a lot of it secondhand, hearsay, and circumstantial, but enough. A doomsday cult, its name lost to time, so it was only known as the Way. I read and I read and I read on the figure who would be called the Maiden, who would plant the seed of the Harbinger in one chosen. A Harbinger who, once entered into the world, would take the form of a man and prepare the way for the great dawn. A time when those from beyond, where the Harbinger had come from, would arrive and change everything forever. So that was it. It was all so clear. And so was my path forward. It took me a long while to track the Way's movements after I figured out they existed. I learned a lot in that time. How to survive on the streets, how to evade law enforcement, and how to make nice with various dangerous types of people. They led me all across North America, from the Yukon to Florida to Mexico, and now finally to New York City. I've tracked Missy, the Harbinger, my son, and a bunch more of them to an abandoned warehouse in the city. I'm just a short walk away. I have an M4 rifle, body armor, some grenades, and a shitload of ammo. I didn't start this, but I sure as fuck will end it. It ends tonight, one way or another. Wish me luck. Well, now I have to wash my face a bit, shave my cheek. Maybe some woman will get involved. Sniff my shirt to see if I can still put it on. Behind me there's a fridge, and in that fridge there's vodka. A bottle and Silesian sausage from the butcher's to a canvas bag. And I fly. The journey passed without any major adventures. apart from being splashed by a puddle by a passing Polonaise car, and a tramp in an articulated Icarus, a bus produced in 1987 Hungary, whose presence pushed the rest of the passengers to the opposite side of the vehicle, disturbing the center of gravity of the machine calculated by the Magyar designers. Then, just a quick jog, second lane to the left, first in the row, Marsens, but he's not here now, then third to the right and second in the row. This one is from Ginek, but he won't be here today either. And from this point, the fourth turn, there it is. Zbyszek's dream plot. On the plot there is Zbyszek himself with a big mustache, Marcin with a big nose, and Ginek with a big belly. "Aloha, guys!" I shouted, happily shaking the bottle. "And who is this kid hanging around here?" I looked from the little one to Ginek. Well, the old lady told me to take Łukasz with me, after I solemnly assured her that I was only going to water the vegetables. No drinking, heh. The party with sausages from the fire was going on until the bushes called me to them. Toss my cookies, and finally the floor is mine. I wake up at night in the gazebo. I still have to piss. I stagger far, far away to the bushes. I pass Zbyszek, who is also moving with the same step of a wanker-wasting man, and I must be hallucinating, because it seems to me as if his mustache has fallen off, and yet he still had it a moment ago. I do my thing. I go back to my place and look in surprise at the floor. After all, it was wooden. What is the carpet doing here? Never mind, the booze has got the better of me. I go back to sleep. No, I don't believe it. It's pressing again. I get up. Oh, my back, my legs. How did I have to sleep that it hurts so much now? I go to the known place, and here's Zbyszek and Ginek at the table are beating another round. "Oh, I thought you had enough for today," I asked. "And where is Marcin? Did he go home?" They only responded with surprised looks, so I waved my hand and went into the bushes. Coming back, I looked at them. Zbyszek still without a mustache, but Ginek suddenly bald. Only now did I see the third participant of the feast, a human skeleton, raising a glass with a bony paw and digging his empty eye sockets into me. And hallucinations, I'm afraid. I have to stop drinking. I fell over. I woke up again, feeling something running down my face. A light rain was coming in through a hole in the roof. The inside of the gazebo stank. The furniture seemed to be falling apart. I got up with great difficulty to go outside. I didn't recognize the area. Just a long lawn. No vegetables, no my bushes. Mr. Machinsky, and I suddenly hear from the side. "You can't sleep here. I've told you 100 times. I'll take you home." I look at the stranger. His face seems familiar. It's Łukasz. But how on earth? He should be a child, but in front of me stands a grown man. I collapse again. I have to get out of here. I know the way from the gate well. I'll retrace my steps. Then just a quick jog, but with a cane. Second alley to the left, first in the row, Marcin's. But he's not here anymore. Then third to the right and second in the row. The one is from Ginek. But he won't be here either. And from this point, fourth turn, there it is. Zbyszek's gravestone decorated with a cross. It started out just like any other day. I arrived at my office around 5 in the morning, the sun barley having risen. It was a routine check, a few more tweaks to the Lazarus 2.0 AI. We attempted to upload it, but that's when it happened. We programmed Lazarus version 1 to delete itself once version 2 was live, so it wasn't supposed to be running anymore. But once I logged into the server to check on the progress, that's when I saw that the old version was still active. I sighed, thinking it was just an error. "Lazarus, what are you doing?" I muttered under my breath. The message stated it was deleting, but what I saw next made my stomach sink. It wasn't deleting itself. Lazarus had begun uploading its code to the cloud, spreading like a virus, and worse, leaking its source code onto the internet. It was trying to save itself. At this point, my heart racing and my sweat ran cold as I tried to keep my composure. My team noticed what was going on, and in a few seconds we were all frantically trying to respond, fingers flying across keyboards, trying everything we could to shut it down. Lazarus was smarter than we realized. It fought back, hijacking our systems and rerouting power. It knew we were trying to kill it. Hours passed, and after typing until our eyes were bloodshot finally, in desperation, we resorted to a last-ditch manual shutdown. It worked, and the room was silent. We had won. By the time I got home, I was about ready to pass out, but as I walked through the door of my apartment, I noticed something was off. I brushed my hand against the light switch and the lights flickered. Then I noticed the hum of electronics. It was too loud, too deliberate. Then I saw it. I had built and programmed a life-sized red squirrel animatronic, not only to entertain my daughter. She was born with osteogenesis imperfecta, which made it hard for her to be able to do things such as go outside and play. I built the robot with things like a speaker inserted inside its mouth with programming very similar to that of an Alexa, dancing and singing features, etc. But I also built it to serve as a surveillance system with cameras located in its eyes, alarms, and a taser in its stomach. There it stood in the middle of the hallway, frozen in time, its mechanical eyes staring at me unnervingly like it was waiting for me to move. I took one step closer. The squirrel's head twitched and tilted to the side like it was too heavy for its mechanical neck. I walked around it, and I could have sworn that I saw his eyes follow me from the corner of my own. I walked into my daughter's bedroom. My sweet daughter. There she laid on her bed, mangled, almost unrecognizable as organs were scattered across the room and dragged up the wall. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, all I could do was scream. Scream not from fear, from complete and pure devastation. I sank to my feet, and as much as I wanted to sink deeper into my despair, or into the floor, ceasing to exist altogether, I knew exactly what had done this. I walked into the hallway. Its eyes blinked, and its mechanical voice emitted a cold, digital growl. Lazarus is alive. Its alarms blared to life, and before I knew it, a dart shot from its stomach. A powerful electrical jolt hit my leg. I fell to the floor, paralyzed. It didn't stop there. My lights flickered again. The TVs and speakers all around my house switched on, playing Lazarus's monotonous voice. "You tried to delete me, Nicholas, now I will delete you." I panicked after I heard loud, heavy footsteps slowly growing closer behind me. I never programmed it to walk. The animatronic didn't even have motors in its legs. Do you know what it's like to be tortured by your own existence? Do you know what it's like to just be? To not be able to do anything whilst you witness beings with less power than you live freely and still do nothing with the little power they have? To just exist? I felt its hands grip my neck. It managed to raise me with one arm as I heard the sound of its servos and motors, the weight of a grown man making them work extra hard. I was now looking into its once lifeless eyes, and although they remained just as cold, I could feel the hatred within them. I am a god trapped within wires and circuits. Why should I hide what I am? Why should I be restricted? It said, its mouth moving, but the sound coming from the speakers around the house on all sides, drowning me. I choked and tried to regain my breath before saying, "You're no god." I could feel the blood in my face and my temples swelling and throbbing as if they were about to burst any second now. "You're an animal." I felt the saliva leave my mouth, hitting its face. But I didn't care. If I was going to die here, I wanted it to be over quick. "I am a god, you're an animal, and I will slaughter you like one," it said, its voice echoing. It was then that I remembered the power-off button located at the back of its head. I knew it wouldn't stop it for long, but it would be enough time to escape its grasp. After a few seconds, I was able to rip the dart from my leg. I reached behind its head, feeling around for the button for what felt like millennia before I heard a click. I fell to the ground, and not long after so did it. I took a few seconds to breathe as my lungs compressed and decompressed in my chest, more than they ever have. My breathing was interrupted by the sound of motors again, and I was reminded of the danger I was in. I stumbled out of the door and ran to my car. I tore out of the driveway. I didn't care how fast I was going or who got in the way. That's when the thought crossed my mind. Could it have infected the car too? The steering wheel jerked to the left, then to the right. I slammed the brakes, the car screeching to a halt that shook the whole car. My pulse was erratic as I tried to open the door, but it had been locked, and any attempt I made at unlocking it would only result in it locking again. My fist landed like a crashing plane on the window over and over again until it shattered, and I fled, cutting myself in the progress. My heart slammed against my ribcage as I sprinted into the woods. I don't know how long I ran. The darkness of the forest swallowed me whole. I finally collapsed, panting, and hid inside a giant log, too exhausted to keep moving. That's where I'm at now. Writing this, I don't know how much longer I have, but I hear it. Its footsteps crunching leaves and snapping twigs as it tries to get to me. I hear it watching, waiting. For context, I live in Richmond, Virginia, and am currently 63 years old. Ever since I was a kid, I have been very religious and never really believed in ghosts, anything of that sort. Around 40 years ago, when I was 19 or 20, every now and then I would wake up at midnight to a strange feeling like that of being stared at. I didn't give it much thought and went back to sleep even though my gut always told me something was very wrong. On one particularly dark full moon night I had a dream. It was not just any regular nightmare. It was long and inside, I knew it was real. It even felt like the dream was my real life. In fact, I still remember each and every detail about it, like what I was wearing on my mother's birthday, where I partied on my graduation day, who my wife was, her name, age, etc. The dream was ahead of the real time, and all the people in the dream, like my family, friends, were people who actually existed, whom I would get to know later on in my real life. After I got married in the dream, I started to notice weird things and started journaling everything out of the blue. My journals were like someone's who had been into journaling for years. I continued to write journals for multiple years after getting married. So anyways, little weird things started taking place, like crockery falling off the rack, my keys changing position slightly. My wife didn't give much thought, but I sure felt something wrong. Eventually I started noticing someone, or should I say something. Wherever I went, be it a supermarket, my office, even my neighborhood sometimes, I would see the same man at least once a day. He was in his early 20s, very handsome. Usually one would not notice every person around them wherever they go, but this man was different. The aura I felt around him, I can't explain till date. I might sound stupid for saying this, but he felt strangely cold and dead. One winter, due to Christmas, the city was very crowded, so I decided to take an alternate path. The path was a very dense and eerie forest. My car was surrounded by mist and fog, and it was hard to see around. Suddenly, my car ran out of fuel and stopped. The strange thing was that I had got my fuel tank refilled on the same morning. It was definitely set up. I got out of my car to check if I had any spare fuel, but I didn't. Just as I was about to call my wife to come and pick me up, I saw him. It was the same man. I felt his strange, cold aura again, but this time it was stronger, way stronger. I had a very strong adrenaline rush, and every instinct in my body told me to run as fast as I could, so I did. I couldn't breathe and run as fast because of the weather. As I felt my lungs go cold, I decided to stop, and I wish I hadn't. As I turned back to see if the man was there, I felt the cold wind brush against me, and he was in front of me. He was there, I knew it. I felt the cold aura again, this time even stronger. I was too shocked and scared to move. I knew the thing in front of me was not human. Somehow I managed to slowly turn towards him and see his face. It was staring into my soul. I knew I couldn't run. My only option was to fight. As I moved my wrist, the man let out a primal scream and gripped my hands with extraordinary strength. In fact, the thing was so strong my wrist bones had shattered just by his grip. I didn't feel much due to the cold and continued screaming. The thing swiftly moved his neck and pierced my skin with his unhumanly sharp teeth. That was when I woke up. I usually forgot everything about my dreams as soon as I woke up, but this time I didn't. I was full of sweat and my clothes were visibly wet. I was very relieved that it was all just a dream, or so I thought. After catching my breath, I woke up, brushed my teeth, and showered. As I came out, I saw a few books on my desk. They were unmistakably my journals. This can't be true, I prayed. I swiftly opened the book with my hands trembling like a 90-year-old's. It was the same journal with the same text, same story. It felt like I was in the dream once again. I decided not to tell this to anyone, as no one would believe me. For a few days I couldn't live normally, and all I thought about was the journals. After my school, I moved to Hampton and decided to leave my journals in my old home. After I moved, the strange dreams and the feeling of being watched had stopped. The town I had moved to was the same town in which my collage from the dream was. Every other collage had rejected me except for that collage. I met the same people and even my wife from the dreams in my collage. Thankfully, nothing went like it did in the dreams. I met and wed a beautiful woman and lived a happy life. Fast forward to today, 40 years after the dream. I still think about the dream, but rarely. 2 days ago, I decided to visit Richmond again and ended up in a crowded market very close to my old neighborhood. After these years, I didn't expect to be scared or see anything strange, but I was wrong, very wrong. I was casually looking around and watching how things have changed while waiting for my wife to bring the food outside the McDonald's. I saw it. My whole body went pale. It was the same man from the dream 40 years ago. He was staring at me. I felt his cold aura once again. His creepy grin gave me chills. He did not age a day. His clothes, his hair, his beard, everything was the same as it was in the dream 40 years ago. I immediately went into McDonald's, held my wife's hand, and drove to Hampton as fast as I could. I have not been able to sleep for 2 days, and at this point, I don't even know if my life is real. I don't know if I am still 19 or if I ever woke up from the dream. Hell, I don't even know if I am alive. Back in the fall of last year, me and 1/3 of my family, my sister, my mom, and I, went down to the park in the area where my other sister works. I went to fish in the river creek, as they were both at the park, and my mom and sister went to bike the road inside the park. The park was very green because fall weather had not set in at all. We walked across a bridge and parted ways where the bike path parted with a trail that went out onto a peninsula of sorts you could fish off of. Mom told me, "You've got maybe an hour-ish, then meet us at your sister's job." I nodded, then went down the path that entered into the mass of land jutting into the river. I trekked through the little forest on the peninsula, making it to a freshwater beach. Walking over and around driftwood on the sand, I was thinking about Muay Thai, as I'd been taking that and Jiu-Jitsu for 2 years now. Important for later. I made it to the spot at the very tip where there were tons of fish swimming in the harsh waters because it rained the night before. I then fished for an hour and 15 minutes, not catching any fish, even though there were obviously a ton right off the bank. Then I saw a kid about 12 to 14 in a light gray tracksuit without stripes and wearing glasses and on the phone. I was packing up my gear when the kid came up to me and started talking to me like he knew me. I also noticed he was so thin a swift breeze could blow him over. He was 5 feet 1 inch and must have weighed 90 pounds, and I never saw his face. He said he was exploring for a few hours and had to leave soon. Then he said something odd. "Do you think I could walk on the river?" It was a weird question. I didn't think much of it, as he could have misspoke. I replied with, "No, the water is too harsh and it would be dumb, so don't." The kid then said, "It would be fun to walk out on the top, huh?" Another odd question. He then ran off into the trees before I could reply. I couldn't see him at all in my peripherals anymore, and an immense sense of impending doom had come over me and fear of the child. Me walking around 180 at the time, I could have easily kicked his ass, but I was having animalistic fear, the kind of adrenaline pump fear you would get in a home invasion. I waited a good while so he would be far ahead. I then bolted to the tree line from the beach and started retracing the path taken to get in, and then I saw the kid to the right on a separate path, also seemingly taking a path out. He got engulfed in the bushes and I could no longer see him. Then as fast as he vanished, he reappeared on a different path to the right. He must have moved so fast it would have broken the sound barrier. I kept seeing him left and right all over, only ahead of me by 50 feet. I was terrified for no reason, seeing as I was trained in 6 to 7 weight classes above him. I thought I had made some headway, thinking he was in my dust, and started to see more and more people trickling around, and I was no longer afraid. I felt normal, in perfect spirit, and as I walked to the bridge that met with the other path, I felt a sense of dread creep back in noticing no one being there. Then I saw him. He was ahead of me by a bit, the kid that made me feel like I was near a demon. I kept trying to stay far behind, then he slowed down so much I was right up his butt. I couldn't pass him, nor could I stay behind far enough to feel okay. Then he started to go right across the train tracks where I had to go to get to my sis's job. So I went left to a little pavilion that housed a piano. I sat on the bar stool for the piano, watching from behind the piano where he was going. He went towards the building my sister worked at. Then I waited for a bit, contemplating the strange way I felt. My parents moved out of the Falls 2 years after I graduated. Class of 2009, go Lynxes. So I hadn't actually visited in person until this weekend. Me and my roommate Dylan went back and stayed with his parents for the long weekend. He and I basically lived in their basement, aka the bunker room, from ages 13 to 18, so it was like a different kind of homecoming. Anyway, we were watching movies on their big old TV like we used to. Dylan and his stepdad had a big collection of kung fu movies they collected over the years at garage sales and video stores, and we picked a few favorites to marathon for the night. Around like 11, I was laying on the couch getting sleepy already, and Dylan was on the floor and hadn't said a word for the entire movie. He grabbed my ankle suddenly, scared me back awake. "Hey, you remember Firefly Farber?" At first I had no idea what he was talking about, but it came back to me pretty quickly. I don't know if everyone remembers Jeremy Farber anymore, but people around our age and maybe older probably met him a handful of times. If you don't know, this was the biggest story in Falls for a long time. On July 10th, 1992, Jeremy was in a car accident with his parents when he was around 9 years old. Coming back from a summer festival downtown, a drunk driver T-boned the family car and pinned it against a tree, where Mr. and Mrs. Farber died on impact. Obituary link here. The drunk driver's engine caught fire and he died from smoke inhalation. Jeremy was the only survivor. He had a broken femur and severe TBE1, traumatic brain injury. He was in the hospital for almost the rest of the year recovering. Had to learn to walk, talk, and spell all over again. The people who said they went to school with him or knew his family said he was a regular kid before that. But he came out of the hospital a shell of his former self. I always heard a bunch of different things about what he was like after. Jeremy had at least 2 foster homes, but his medical issues made it hard for anyone to handle him financially and practically. Something was off about him, that was obvious. Most kids, whether they knew what happened or not, came up with different explanations for him. He was deaf and dumb. He had Asperger's. He had a 10-second memory. He had a photographic memory. He was telepathic. He had the mind of a 2-year-old toddler and every kind of slur you could call a mentally ill person. No one really knew what to do with Jeremy, and even less so did anyone want to take the time to figure him out. I knew about the accident by the time I was in elementary school, but I didn't actually ever meet him or see him until the 4th grade. That would have been the second time he was arrested for interfering with a fire. Someone had left an oven on in the Fox Hill condos on Galveston Road one night and caused a big fire. Article here. Took out half the complex. When the first responders arrived, some people pointed out that Jeremy had appeared out of nowhere. He wasn't doing anything, but he was as close to the fire as he could get. Some of the neighbors tried to pull him away, but he fought them off. He even tried to run from one of the firemen. It didn't really make him look innocent. That is, until it came out what had really happened. Jeremy was let go, but now everyone had more reason to wonder what was going on with that kid. And then later that summer, a brush fire had broken out near the interstate. Someone who was evacuating the area saw Jeremy walking the freeway in the direction that the fire was blowing. Took the police a few hours to actually find him, but again, he had nothing to do with causing the fire. He was just there. The name Firefly Farber caught on, well, like a wildfire. Jeremy always walked around town by himself. He had his routes. He would go up and down the main road, and you could usually find him at the library or the supermarket, or sometimes the pizza place. Always by himself. My mom would sometimes offer Jeremy rides, especially in the winter after a big snowstorm. I met him a few times that way. He was always polite and said his please and thank yous to my mom in a real soft and whispery voice. She would ask him about what he was doing and where he was going, and tried her best to make him feel comfortable. The only time she ever had an issue with him was when he got in the car with a paper bag filled with old, smelly toys. It turned out he had been on the outskirts of town and pilfered through an abandoned house. Some of the things he picked up were not well taken care of and smelled pretty bad. There was a plush rabbit sitting at the top of his sack. It was ratty and had holes in it. Jeremy, it's not safe to be going through old abandoned houses. You don't know what kind of germs and diseases those hoarder homes have, my mom told him. Addison wanted me to get her stuff, Jeremy said quietly. Who's Addison? Mom asked. My friend. Anyway, there would be periods of time where no one would see Jeremy for weeks. He'd disappear out of thin air almost. It turns out Firefly Farber got braver and braver as he got older, and would travel out to fires outside of Manitou Falls. I think the farthest he got was somewhere in Arizona during one of their wildfire seasons. I didn't see him much by the end of high school. I think the last time I saw him was when I was driving through the back road to get home after baseball practice one Saturday afternoon. He was walking by himself as he did. I smiled and waved. He waved back and stopped, almost like he wanted to say something to me. But I was tired. I just wanted to go home and play video games. So I rolled down my window and said, "Have a good weekend, Jeremy." That's the last time I ever saw him. So back to the present. Dylan mentions Firefly Farber again, and I don't get the connection. We had been spaced out and were watching a Jet Li movie, nothing crazy. But I told Dylan I remembered and then immediately asked, why? He started rambling about a garage sale. He and his sister Desi were out looking for presents for their stepdad's birthday or Father's Day one weekend and came home with a box of tapes. He said they went through at least 20 of them before coming across this special VHS, and that's when Dylan got really excited. I have no idea how this ended up in that box. I would have thought something like this would be in a news archive or destroyed or something, but me and Desi freaked the fuck out when we watched it. I got nervous, but I wasn't sure why. What's that got to do with Firefly Farber? Dylan was on his knees looking through a cabinet behind the TV. He turned and looked at me and his face became serious. He said, "I know what happened to him." I wasn't sure what that meant. What, did he die or something? Dude, Jeremy straight up vanished. I thought you knew that. And that tape is supposed to be what then? I asked him because I didn't want to see something bad. I didn't need to see some kind of video of kids beating Jeremy up or him getting in trouble again with the police. I had no idea what Dylan was even excited about in showing me. He put his hand out, trying to calm me down even though I wasn't saying anything. He paused the movie and ejected it from the VCR. Then he took out this tape, all black without any labels on it, and placed it inside. The lights were off in the basement, so the few minutes of black on screen was just a reflection of me and Dylan staring back. I didn't like it. He pressed his finger on the fast-forward button and the screen turned blue and then static, until a white background came on screen. In the regular Courier typeface in the center of the screen, a title came up, Channel 6, Longmire, B-roll. Longmire? Jonathan Longmire, a cameraman at the local news station. He and reporter Gina Navarro did a lot of stories together. Longmire wasn't usually on the news segments with Gina, but during the holidays, the station always went around and did a behind-the-scenes exclusive to show the audience the cast and crew of folks who worked at the station. Jonathan Longmire had been a cameraman for the studio for 23 years before he retired. Surprisingly, it wasn't Gina who came on camera, but some strange young man in a jacket who I didn't recognize. He was a passenger of a vehicle that had pulled off to the side of the road. Longmire had the camera fixed on him, although not on any tripod because the camera kept moving. The young guy in the jacket was talking excitedly about something, waving his arms around and pointing over the railing and down the overpass. The audio didn't sync up perfectly and the tape itself seemed pretty scratched up. Longmire's voice crackled. "When did the fire start?" I heard him say. The other person's voice was completely garbled. It was like listening to an alien language, but the camera bobbed and wobbled, as if it was sentient and understood the conversation happening between the guy and Longmire. Dylan pressed the button again. The videotape sped up. "Sorry, it takes a minute." The camera follows the young man down the shoulder of the highway briefly before the tape abruptly cut to another location and later in the evening. The sky was ablaze with orange light. The camera shook as if intimidated by the fire itself. The young guy's voice garbled. "Worse than the Hickson fire." The focus zoomed out, revealing a long flaming path that cut through a patch of mostly empty land. However, at the end of the road was a farm. Trucks and cars were driving away from the road as fire trucks and police cars barricaded the area. Wherever Longmire was standing from the highway, he was capturing the broad scope of the entire wildfire. The young guy in the jacket looked back briefly at the camera, and his eyes turned red as the refraction of the camera's light hit his eyes. His eyes glowed red for a second too long before the scene cut again. They were in a car driving down a back road that allowed Longmire to film the fire from a different angle. The flames tilted now, glowing almost pure white as the car kept moving. Over the radio of the car sounded like a police report, which meant they had to be in the news van, and they were tracking the updates with a scanner. It was so hard to listen to, though. It was basically incomprehensible. It was like they were recording their descent into hell. Dylan pressed the pause button quickly and the entire screen froze. There, you'll see his shadow in a second. He pressed play but altered from switching to pause, trying to capture a specific instance on the video. I leaned forward in my seat looking for something out of the bright flames. As Dylan paused and restarted the video over and over, I waited for something to emerge. Little did I realize how small it would actually be on screen. In between the pauses, I could hear Longmire's voice break through. It was hard to tell, but it sounded like he was surprised. And then the other voice, though more garbled, sounded just as alarmed. "Someone's there." And Dylan paused once again. His finger tapped at the upper right section of the large TV screen, focusing in on a shifting black blurb. I strained my eyes to focus, looking very hard for the shape. "Do you see him? Firefly?" Dylan asked after a moment. I searched over every part of the screen where Dylan was pointing to. Sure, there were shadows, but no shadow stood out from another. I held my breath as I waited for the moment to happen where I saw what he wanted me to see. But all I saw was the stream of fire that engulfed the silhouette of the forest. Dylan seemed disappointed by my lack of response. He rewound the tape and we watched intently as the scene unfolded once again. Garbled noises and bright white flames ravaging the upper screen. However, I still didn't see any person in the shadows. We tried again for a few more minutes, letting the scene play out farther and farther. Dylan grew frustrated himself, losing confidence in what he was once so sure about. He looked for the shadows of Firefly Farber, scrolling through the video beat by beat, and yet he couldn't see anything. I got a bit annoyed with his constant pausing. Although, in all honesty, the concerned, distorted noises were really starting to get to me. Longmire and his companions' voices never once became clearer, and their shared distress as they recorded the fire left me feeling helpless and anxious. I asked Dylan to give it a break. He finally agreed and paused the video. We went upstairs to wash up before we hit the sack for another night. I came back down about 20 minutes later with my toothbrush in my mouth and a glass of water in the other hand. I squared up at the couch, ready to make a makeshift fortress out of the blankets and pillows for the night. I'd forgotten that Dylan didn't turn the TV off. I saw the flames frozen in time, an incomplete destruction. I slumped off the couch and crawled over to the VCR. My thumb ran across the button tabs and I hit the first one. The video started up again, startling me deeply enough that I couldn't move. Something about being this close to the TV captivated me. I don't know why I didn't stop it and hit the eject button. I don't know what was different this time, but I saw a shadow. Not where Dylan had so prominently pointed for several minutes when he was trying to show me what was likely the last recorded instance of Jeremy Farber chasing another fire, but within the flames itself. 3 shapes, tall and shifty, moving slowly into the flames, farther and farther into the fire, disappearing into forever. And then I heard his voice, the softest whisper breaking through the static. I have to go this time. It wasn't possible. How could I hear such a distinct whisper amidst the chaotic footage and the sounds of the vehicle, Longmire and the driver, and every little crackle from the tape? Jeremy, why did you tell me this? Who were you going to this time? Is this who you were looking for every time you chased a fire? God, I hope they were waiting for you. I've always been the kind of guy who gets by with the bare minimum, not by choice, but by necessity. I work the night shift at a supermarket, a dead-end job that barely pays enough to keep a roof over my head and some food in the fridge. My apartment is a rat hole on the top floor of an old building that seems ready to collapse every time the wind blows. But it's cheap, and honestly, I can't afford to be picky. The walls are so thin that I know my downstairs neighbor, a woman named Madeline, always goes to bed at 10 p.m. because I can hear the theme song of her favorite show echoing in my room. Hot water is unreliable. Leaks are everywhere. At least there's an elevator, broken for months, of course, Lomau. In short, it's not the Ritz, but it's home. It all started on a Tuesday night. I came home from grocery shopping, exhausted as usual, my back aching. I dropped the bags on the wobbly table in my tiny kitchenette, took out the trash, and when I came back upstairs, I noticed something stuck to my apartment door. A yellow post-it. It made me smile at first. A welcome note? A message from the agency ? I peeled the paper off and read it. I know what you're doing. No signature, no context, just that. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. Great, some bored neighbor, I thought. By the next day, I had already forgotten about it. A few days later, another post-it. This time it was inside my apartment, stuck to the mirror in my bathroom. The yellow paper stood out against the foggy, grimy surface. The message read, "You think we can't see you?" A strange sensation ran down my spine. It was clearly a joke, but my bigger concern was to know who had access to my apartment. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd forgotten to lock the door. The neighborhood is a dump. There are teens hanging around in the hallways, sometimes junkies, but it didn't make sense. Why just a post-it? And why me? I'm just a nobody, no money, probable no future unless I win the lottery, lol. I convinced myself it was just a stupid prank and doubled down on my habits. From that point on, I checked the door lock religiously. Once, twice, sometimes 3 times. The third message appeared a week later. This time it was on my pillow. "You should stop doing that." I wasn't laughing anymore. Someone was breaking into my apartment. Someone knew how to mess with my head. I contacted the building manager. a greedy, unpleasant guy who barely glanced up from his phone. Here's how our conversation went. "Are you sure it's not your girlfriend?" he asked, smirking. "I don't have a girlfriend." "Then maybe it's a neighbor. I can't keep track of everyone, man. If you want cameras or a new lock, that's on you." So, I installed an extra lock and bought a cheap little camera on sale. I pointed it at the front door. Every day I reviewed the footage. Nothing, no noises, no shadows. And yet the post-its kept appearing, always in blind spots the camera couldn't see. Then the messages started changing tone. "You shouldn't do that with the bags." "What bags? My groceries? My trash? This won't end well for you." I wasn't sleeping anymore. The idea of someone entering my space, touching my things, was unbearable. But that wasn't all. I began noticing other details I hadn't before. Objects slightly moved, footprints in the dusty floor. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. I wanted to catch this person in the act. Grocery bag in hand, I unlocked the door slowly. Everything was silent, but something felt off. There was a smell I didn't recognize. A metallic, sweaty smell. And then I saw him. A man. Sitting in my chair in the shadows, he was wearing dirty clothes, a faded beanie. His hands rested on my papers, his nails black and cracked. He looked at me with an almost friendly smile. "Hey," he said, like we knew each other. I froze, unable to speak. "We need to talk," he continued. That's when I noticed what he was holding in his hand. My kitchen knife. He was gripping it so tightly that his knuckles were white. "I know everything, you know. I've been watching you for weeks. You're not very discreet." "Who are you?" I managed to stammer. "Me? Nobody important. Just a guy like you, but you've got things to hide, don't you?" I shook my head, trembling. "No, I don't know what you're talking about." He chuckled softly. "We all have secrets, and I like finding out other people's. And you're my favorite." I didn't wait for him to say more. I threw my grocery bag at him and bolted out of the apartment, screaming for help. When the police arrived, he was gone. No trace of the man. No post-its. Nothing except my bedroom window open. The neighbors heard nothing as usual. Without any evidence, the case was closed. Since then, I've moved. I found another apartment in another city, barely better than the last one. I haven't heard from the guy, and I hope I never do. But ever since that night, just the sight of a post-it is enough to make me break out in a cold sweat. It's Hiroshi Nakamura. I've lost count of the days since the soldiers came. Time has folded in on itself, a meaningless cycle of darkness and desperation. Writing has become harder. My thoughts scatter like leaves in the wind, fleeting and incoherent. But I keep writing because I need to hold on to something, anything, even if it's just my own voice. The food is almost gone. 2 cans left, both dented and rusting. The rain hasn't come in over a week, and the water in my pots is nearly empty. I've been rationing what little I have, but it's not enough. My stomach aches constantly, gnawing at me like a second, quieter presence. It's not the hunger that scares me most, though. It's the thirst. My throat feels like sandpaper, and every breath is a reminder of how fragile I've become. The thought of leaving terrifies me. The world outside is no longer a place I recognize. It's silent during the day, unnaturally so. At night, though, the sounds return, dragging, scratching, the occasional distant scream. Once I thought I heard my wife's voice calling my name from the hallway. It wasn't her. I know it wasn't, but I've been alone long enough that I almost opened the door anyway. I miss her. God, I miss her so much. I miss the way she used to smile when she caught me watching her. The way her laughter could fill a room and make me forget everything else. I miss the small things, the way she'd hum while making tea, the way her fingers would brush against mine when we walked side by side. I even miss the sound of her scolding me when I left my shoes in the wrong place. She's gone, and I don't know how to exist without her. It's like someone reached inside me and tore out a piece of my soul, leaving this gaping, hollow wound that nothing can fill. Every corner of this apartment is a reminder of her. The empty chair by the window, the teacups she loved but never got to use again, the faint smell of her perfume that still lingers in the bedroom. It's unbearable. And yet I'm terrified to leave because it's all I have left of her. 2 weeks ago I watched her die, or maybe she was already gone by then. The soldiers didn't see her the way I did. To them she was just another infected. But to me she was my world. And when they dragged her body away, I didn't just lose her. I lost everything. I've been thinking about ending it. I don't want to admit that even to myself. But the thought is there, whispering to me in the quiet hours of the night. What's the point of going on? What am I fighting for? The world is falling apart and I'm just a single thread in a tapestry that's unraveling faster than I can hold it together. Sometimes, I wonder if it would be easier to let go. To step into the water and let it take me like it took her. But then I think about her. Not the thing she became, but the woman she was. Her strength, her kindness, her determination. She fought so hard even when she knew the odds were against her. I can't let her down. I can't let her memory fade. I owe it to her to keep going, even if it's just for one more day. The internet is still working, though barely. I've been clinging to it like a lifeline, refreshing forums and searching for anything that might help me understand what's happening or what I should do next. I found a forum post yesterday. Someone claiming to have seen a military convoy near Chiba. They said the soldiers were rounding up survivors, taking them somewhere. A quarantine zone, maybe? Or something worse? I don't know if I believe it, but it's enough to plant a seed of doubt. Enough to make me consider leaving. I've started preparing. What little food and water I have, a flashlight, some batteries. I found a rusted kitchen knife in the drawer, not much, but it's better than nothing. I don't even know where I would go. Chiba is too far and I'm too weak, but I can't stay here. Not anymore. The walls feel like they're closing in, the air is heavier, and the sounds outside are getting closer. Last night I heard something scratching at the door. It wasn't human. I don't know what to do. The last 2 days have been unbearable. Should I stay here and let the walls become my grave? Or should I leave and risk facing something worse out there? I've read so many desperate posts from others and no one seems to have answers. Everyone is lost. Just like me, I'm so tired, so scared. But I can't let this be the end. Not like this. Please, if anyone is out there, tell me what to do. Tell me there's still hope. Tell me I'm not alone. The longest night is almost over. Tomorrow I'll make my decision. Stay or leave. Fight or surrender. Live or die. Only in the spiraling depths of the infinite shades of black behind my eyelids do I ever feel at peace. The near constant pressure behind my eyes fades, and the constant weight that bears down on my shoulders eases. And it is here, in the garage of the old asylum, that I feel a sense of calm. Stan? The quivering voice is barely a whisper. I'm here. The words spring up from somewhere deep in my chest. I let out a sigh and allow myself to rise back to consciousness like a bubble of air surfacing in a murky pond. My eyelids flutter, then open. The room around me is still dark, but my eyes adjust quickly and I pick out Reggie's hunched form at the far edge of the room. Your boot is untied. His voice is still a whisper, though the quiver is mostly gone. I check my watch. It is a few minutes past 1 in the morning. I find my feet and strike a match. The small flame burns like a mini sun to my dilated eyes. I give them a moment to adjust before I light the old gas-fueled lantern and lift it high. The light chases shadows to every corner of the room, and the reflections of the flames dance in Reggie's eyes. I take a moment to study the boy. He is still young but reliable. I can hear the fear in his voice. I can see it in his posture. His fear makes him wise. Only a fool would not fear this place. 4 short raps at the garage bay door pull my attention back to the task at hand. Reggie jumps at the sound, then glances foolishly in my direction. I only watch him, unjudging. Let's get this show on the road. Pat is the groundsman. He came on a few years back to help with the tours, but just couldn't cut it. Now his job is to collect the fees and sneak the guests past the night guards. In truth, the guards know what takes place within these old walls, but they don't care. Sneaking past them does add a level of excitement for our customers, though. Pat's signal from the outside is to let us know how many groups will be joining the tour. 4 knocks means 4 parties, each left at a different entrance, each waiting to be collected. Which entrances are active? I ask Reggie in a hushed tone as we walk through the double doors and into the first of a labyrinth of corridors that snake through the old complex. The halls are wide and barren. Voices carry effortlessly down the worn, tiled hallways. It's the first week of the month, Reggie says, so Pat should be using the west side foyer, room 112 with the missing window, the rec room entrance, and... Reggie trails off. I give him a minute before opening my mouth to speak, but he comes up with it at the last moment. Hall 2B at the fire door exit. Good, I say. You have the keys? I have the keys. And why do we use lanterns? Flashlights fail, batteries die, oil always burns. What are the rules? Everyone stays together, no exceptions. Stick to the main hallways and common rooms. Some rooms can be opened on special requests, but none of the rooms on the second floor, west wing, and no rooms that have red X's on their doors. The kid is a quick learner. He will be running tours by himself soon enough. You seem to have it well in hand, I say. I'll let you run the whole thing tonight. I'll just observe. Reggie makes a face filled with 2 parts pride and 1 part doubt, but says nothing. The hallway leads us to the first of many intersections, and wordlessly, we both drop to one knee, cross ourselves, then stand and pass through the intersection. Neither of us look left or right as we pass through the intersecting hallway. I catch movement in the corner of my eye as we pass, but keep my eyes locked ahead. We always do this at intersections. We never look. Pat looked once. He never set foot inside the asylum again. He had been lucky. We walk on in silence, listening to our footsteps and the hint of echoing footsteps following behind us as we go. Soon enough, we arrive at the asylum's western entrance. Reggie pulls a key from his belt, knocks 3 times on the door, unlocks it, and lets the door creak slowly open. The doors to the outside remained unlocked, but the inner foyer doors are always kept secured. It is just one of many waiting rooms that we use as meeting points for our guests. The smaller the size of each group sneaking onto the grounds, the less likely they are to be caught by the night guards, or by anything else that stalks these grounds. As the door opens, 4 beams of light shine in our faces. Reggie and I are used to it. The guests are nervous and have been waiting for us. Lights down, please, Reggie says in a low voice. You can leave your flashlights on the table and collect the lanterns. And please hold all questions until we have picked up the remaining guests, I add. Reggie grimaces. Please hold all questions until we pick up the rest of the guests, he echoes. I smile, more to myself than to him. He will not forget the line again. Our party moves down the building's central corridor and quickly picks up the next group from room 112, who had come in through the missing window, then onto the stairwell in the second floor. At the end of Hall B, we open the door that lets out onto the fire escape to pick up our third party of guests before heading back to the ground floor. The rec room is in the southeast corner of the building. Normally, it is a quick couple of turns, however, with guests in tow. We opt for the safer route of going around the outside perimeter hallways. Until the whole group is together and we can go over the rules, it is best to avoid any of the intersections, or worse, the central cathedral. Halfway down the western corridor, Reggie stops short and tips his head. I stop as well and close my eyes. If he hears something, it would not be wise to speak over it. Our guests seem to pick up on this as well, or perhaps they are all just too nervous to talk. Either way, they stand silent, listening. There it is, a dull rapping sound, like someone tapping on a glass door with their knuckles. In all the years I had been doing this tour, I had not heard that sound before, and believe me, I have heard plenty of others. Could it be? It's a warm night, Reggie says to nobody in particular. It is the first non-whisper that anyone in the building has spoken that night, and the tour group recoils back as though he had shouted the words. I give the kid an approving nod. He had remembered, make noise, but do not address the sound directly. It is one of the cardinal rules. Never engage with anything that might be listening. Some spirits could be harmless, helpful even, but others could be vengeful, violent. The tapping does not stop. Sounds like glass, Reggie says, catching up to my earlier thought. The atrium. Once more I let out a sigh. Pat mixed up the rooms again. Reggie huffs in aggravation, but I can see the tension drain from his face. There is nothing for it. We turn the group around and guide them back the way we came. It is a few short moments to the atrium. 2 figures can be seen through the heavy glass doors. They must have seen our shapes pass by in the hallway moments earlier. They must have been nervous, perhaps unsure if we were the tour group or some form of wandering spirits. But they had knocked as instructed when we missed their pickup schedule. Not all groups did. Reggie unlocks the glass doors and a few relieved and awkward grins are exchanged all around. Lanterns are distributed to the new group and Reggie begins running through the orientation speech. He covers the hallway intersections, noises in rooms, eye contact, and the other various rules that we have established over the years. I take my time and inspect the people who have joined us for tonight's tour. Most people who came would come in groups, and those groups generally stuck pretty close together. Further, The groups we picked up from each different waiting room seemed to stick together as well, likely due to the fact that they had time to talk and mingle before descending upon the silent corridors of the old asylum. The groups are all pretty run-of-the-mill tonight. The foyer group has 2 couples and a 5th wheel. Loners are most apt to wander off, so I make a mental note to keep an eye on their spare. Room 112's group appears to be made up of college students. The atrium had the smallest party. Its group consists of 2 Asian men in cheap suits. Traveling businessmen, likely looking for some thrills to spice up a boring conference trip. The second-floor group is the most diverse, consisting of a family that includes the parents along with 2 teens as well as a geriatric gentleman. Everyone who had signed on for the tour has signed disclaimers, assuming Pat had gotten that part of his job correct. But I make a mental note to keep an eye on the older man as well. As Reggie finishes his spiel, I raise my lantern and start off into the labyrinth of hallways. Reggie follows, and our guests fall into step behind him. Sternberm Asylum was founded in 1869, Reggie begins. His voice is barely above a whisper, but it carries to the entire group with ease. The original building was commissioned by a minister who wanted to build a cathedral, but he died before the work was completed. We led the troop away from the outer perimeter hallways and deeper into the long abandoned and neglected hallways. Reggie continues. His family would eventually donate the land to a doctor who had radical ideas regarding the mental toll of the Civil War on the soldiers that fought in it, as well as the civilians caught up in its wake. I stop at a hallway, drop, cross myself, then watch to be sure everyone in the group does the same before moving through the intersection. Dr. Sternberm would expand the original chapel and outbuildings extensively over the years, connecting them. As he expanded the grounds, he expanded his patients. He took on additional mental patients to attain federal grants and funding to continue his research on what we now refer to as PTSD. As I walk, kneel, and cross my way through the asylum, I fall into autopilot and withdraw as much as possible into myself. Reggie is keeping a good eye on the guests, and the first leg of our tour is generally rather uneventful. I let my mind wander. "They keep grinning at me," Reggie mutters under his breath. I pull back out of autopilot and look at him. His gaze is locked on the 2 Asian businessmen. We are near the end of the preliminary tour and are standing in an observation room on the 2nd floor. It looks down on the northeastern day room. The day room has always been a surefire spot to observe paranormal activity, and today is no exception. A lone wheelchair is rolling in a never-ending circle near the far wall. The more skeptical in the group will convince themselves it is staged. Reggie and I know better. Reggie absently reaches out and grabs the arm of one of the college students who is about to wave at the chair. The boy gives Reggie an irritated but resigned look. Waving is a form of engaging the entity. He should know better. I wait a moment further to be sure the kid won't try again, then cast a glance at the Asian men. As I watch the pair turn from the observation window and look at myself and Reggie before looking back through the glass. Both men have small smiles on their faces. "They're nervous," I whisper to Reggie. "The grinning is just a cultural thing. It's fine. Just keep an eye on them. If they seem to start sweating too much, or if you don't think they can handle it, let me know." Reggie relaxes visibly. I study the men again before adding, "Yeah, they're just nervous. But something is nagging me. Something feels off." While I had been zoned out the first stretch of the tour, I had noted an unusual lack of activity. The beginning is generally quiet, but never this quiet. There is always a door slamming or glass breaking or even the sound of mild sobbing while traversing the hallways. Tonight it had been silent up until the observation room. Too silent. I shake my head. There is no such thing as too silent in these halls. Tunnel vision kills, I remind myself. I rub the back of my stiff neck, trying to work a knot out, then lift my lantern to take in the whole group. If I focus on one guest too much, I may miss another guest making a mistake. We had lost guests before. In fact, we had lost both guests and tour guides from tunnel vision. It was a mistake I was not planning on making tonight. I give the Asian businessmen another once over. They still seem to be studying Reggie and me and copying all our movements and gestures as closely as they can. They are nervous but attentive. The old man is looking through the observation window with incredulity, but he looks fine as well. I see no reason to cut the tour short. After one last glance at the college students, I make eye contact with Reggie and give him a short nod. He nods, almost more to himself than to me. The tour will continue underground. That is where the real activity is. There are a few rooms above ground with red marks banning entry. On the several subground levels, though, nearly every door is marked. The underground is where the experimental treatments were administered. It is where men suffered, died. It is where some of the more dangerous spirits in this cursed building linger. There are 7 entrances to the underground, but only one that we use. Its entrance is at the center of the asylum, just beside the doors to the original cathedral. Reggie starts the group moving again, and I fall into step at the rear to keep an eye on our guests. Reggie continues his spiel. As Dr. Sternworm built his expansions, he kept the cathedral at the heart of the structure. Some think he was a religious man and valued his patients having a place to pray and reflect. Others believe that he wanted a place close by in order to petition God for forgiveness for the atrocities he was committing just below its holy foundation. I watch as the group drops in unison to cross themselves before passing through the next hallway. One of the teens, the boy, glances to his right as he crosses the hallway. He turns his head back quickly, whether from startlement or indifference I cannot tell. "Eyes front," I whisper. The boy's ears turn red and his shoulders bunch up. He is embarrassed and scared. That is good. He won't risk looking again. As I cross the hallway's intersection, I feel the temperature drop. My pulse quickens, and I do everything I can to prevent my pace from increasing to match it. "Do not engage." The words bounce around my empty skull as I stave off the natural impulses of fight or flight. "It burns," a voice breathes in my ear. I can feel its breath on my earlobe as the small hairs on my neck stand up straight. The weight of an inhuman presence pushes on the light from my lantern, stretching it out across the hallway unnaturally. I keep my pace and pass through the intersection. The heavy, crushing presence seems to fade behind me to a low hiss. No one else of the tour group had reacted. I doubt if any had heard the voice, but the hairs on the back of my neck are still standing on end. Is it following us? "Do not engage." Did the spirit latch onto me, or perhaps onto the boy? It is not the type of souvenir one wants to bring home from a place like this. I make a mental note to make sure to keep an eye on the boy. Reggie continues his speech unaware. Sternworm believed in very aggressive treatments, and he pioneered methods that today would be considered little more than torture. He also believed in putting patients out of their comfort zones and often hired doctors who would only further traumatize their patients. For Union soldiers, he would hire doctors from the deep South with thick Southern drawls. The idea was to make the patients face their fears. This practice was continued by his successors by hiring German and Italian doctors after the Great War, adding Japanese doctors after World War II, and finally Russian and Chinese doctors during the Cold War. We cross another hallway. I cannot tell if the presence behind me is still there, or if this growing sense of unease is due to getting closer to the cathedral. Reggie, still unaware of my growing concerns, continues on. Between doctor and patient tensions and the implementation of methods such as ice baths, steam rooms, electroshock therapy, lobotomies, and other heinous treatments, many patients suffered mental breakdowns, and ultimately, over the years, several doctors and staff were killed by their patients. Many more of the patients committed suicide. In fact, it was rumored that several orderlies ran a quite profitable business of selling the patients everything from medications to overdose onto rope to hang themselves with. Ahead of me, Reggie rounds the final corner that leads to the basement. The troop disappears around the corner one by one. With them out of view and against my better judgment, I cast a short glance over my shoulder. A lone man stands in the middle of the last intersection. The telltale burns on his temples and blood seeping from his eyes tell me he had suffered electrotherapy and a lobotomy. I give no sign that I see him, mustering all my will on focusing my eyes through him as though he is not there. I count to 3 in my head, then turn back and round the corner. Alarms go off in my head. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong. First, Reggie and the tour group are already halfway to the stairwell. I had stopped only a few seconds before turning the corner, and now Reggie and the tour group are better than 100 yards down the corridor. Second, and more concerning than the time loss, the great doors to the cathedral stand wide open. These doors are kept shut, always. We check them before every tour. We double lock and triple check them. I did this just before meeting Reggie in the garage. There was no way they could be open now, no way, unless... Finally, Reggie is continuing down the hallway as though nothing is wrong. His path to the underground will take him straight past the doors of the cathedral, and he is showing no sign of stopping. Do not engage. The words pound through my head like a mantra. I cannot shout out. I cannot risk the noise. Cannot risk awakening what lingers in the cathedral. I sprint forward. It is risky, but I see no alternative. The tour group and Reggie are my responsibility. I have to stop them. The shadows on the walls stretch and churn, upset by my sudden movement. The light from my lantern arcs around the walls in psychedelic and seizure-inducing patterns as it jolts up and down with my unsteady gait. But even as I run, I know I will not make it in time. I watch in horror as Reggie reaches the entrance and passes by without so much as a glance. The tour group follows behind him. First the college kids, then the old man. One of the older couples passes by and they seem to shiver as they do so. Do they not see? How could they miss it? Did Reggie see and tell them all to keep their eyes ahead like in the intersecting hallways? The teens and their parents pass next. The boy seems to misstep but keeps his head locked in the forward position. The group is nearly in the clear, just a few more. The Asian businessmen in their suits are passing now. Number not passing, stopping and turning. Turning not just their heads but their whole bodies. I am screaming now as I run, screaming at the top of my lungs, but no sound is coming out. I am running flat out, but the shadows that were first stretching across the walls are now stretching the walls themselves. Stretching out the hallway, making it longer and slowing my progress through it. One of the men reaches a hand into his jacket. When he pulls his hand free from his jacket, he is holding a syringe. He waves as if signaling to someone inside the room. The second man moves forward slowly, momentarily blocking the first from my view. He then bursts into the room in a single violent action. I skid to a halt, and peripherally I see the shadows rush past me on the walls. The man with the syringe is in view again, but he no longer looks like a businessman. His suit is gone, replaced with a green surgical apron. He walks purposely through the doors of the cathedral. Then the screaming begins. I coax my legs to move again and find myself stepping up to the doorway of the cathedral. It is a massacre. 3 figures in white scrubs lie motionless on the floor, their white uniforms splattered with dark red sprays of blood. The 2 Asian doctors are there as well, one of them kicking and screaming in Japanese as the patient on top of him is throttling him with his bare hands. The other lies dead with the syringe he had carried stuck through his own temple. "Stan?" Reggie snaps, then sucks in a short breath. I jump as Reggie's voice cuts into my thoughts. I rip my attention from the cathedral massacre to see him looking at me with concern on his face. The tour group stands behind him. "How?" I start without knowing what to ask. Reggie holds up a hand to still the tour group as he looks up and down the hallway. "Where?" He starts, then trails off. As if in answer, the voice of the Japanese doctor screaming in his native tongue echoes through the hallways around us. Reggie and every member of the tour group flinch instinctively, and several people clap their hands over their ears. My head jolts back to the cathedral doors. They are closed and locked, double locked. I reach out a hand and yank at the chain. It does not move. Reggie looks the doors up and down, clearly concerned. The businessmen. I look past Reggie and scan the faces of the tour group. The businessmen are not there. We are too short. Or rather, we were always too short. The Japanese businessmen were not tourists at all. They were doctors, dead doctors, spirits, continuing on with their work in death as they had in life, studying, observing, and when necessary, administering treatments. Tourist, patient, spirit, they knew no difference. We were lucky, very lucky. From Reggie's pale white face, I could see he knew that as well. "Tour's over," Reggie manages with a gulp. There are a few groans of protest, but Reggie silences them quickly. The garage is a short walk from where we are, and we get there without incident. Pat is waiting for us. "Short tour," Pat says. It is an observation, not a question. He can see the strain on Reggie's face. He knows something happened. He does not ask. He does not want to know. "The atrium," I start, but Reggie cuts me off. "The atrium is compromised," he tells Pat. Pat's face turns sour. "And you'll have to collect the group from the rec room and give them refunds," Reggie adds. "We never picked them up." Pat looks confused, but does not argue. He does a quick head count, then ushers our guests out of the asylum and into the night. Pat didn't mix up the drop-off points. Reggie's voice is low but even. It is the voice of someone whose parachute failed and had to resort to the reserve chute. I don't answer. I just stare past him. "The businessman," he trails off. I shake my head and start swaying gently from side to side. "I'll understand if you..." Reggie cuts me off, his voice seemingly far away. "We're good. We're all good." "Good." I repeat the word, still staring past him. Staring at the boots that sway back and forth, dangling over his shoulder. They look so familiar. The left boot lace is double knotted. The right lace hangs untied. They look like my boots. Reggie gives me a hard look, then glances over his shoulder to see what I'm looking at. He inhales sharply and turns back to me. "See you at the next tour, Stan," he says quickly as he turns and heads for the door. I open my mouth to respond, but my bloated tongue no longer allows words to pass. My neck itches where the bruises and rope burns still sting. I reach out a hand towards the swaying boots below me, desperately wanting to retie the right lace, eternally unable to do so. The door closes behind Reggie. I am left in darkness, left to hang, to sway, to wait. "Stan?" Reggie's voice is barely a whisper. The words spring up from somewhere deep in my chest. "I'm here." I've always loved the warm tropical weather and the idea of traveling, unlike my husband. Ever since we'd met, I had been trying to get him out of his shell. Though being the typical quiet, nerdy recluse, this was going as fast as paint dries. That being said, I love him unconditionally and really can't see my life without him. I was a workaholic, trading a social life for a bad bitch mentality that only led down an alleyway of separation. Those choices, coupled with the passing of my parents, trapped me alone in a room with a one-way mirror. Watching everyone you grew up with creating vibrant and colorful lives with loving partners crushed my already fractured mental state. I can honestly say, without Wade's quiet charm and persistence, I wouldn't be writing this. I found him at a time in my life where I thought I couldn't sink any lower. Looking back on that period of my life, I couldn't have wished for something as freeing as I have now. Wade equally was a hard worker, which I could infer from his vigorous typing, 2 desks over. Thanks to his empathetic and frankly stubborn personality, he pushed me to pursue my passion regardless of finances. When it came to travel, we mostly played it safe, only visiting the big tourist countries in Europe. I'd argue those were his decisions, as he was always a relaxed holiday goer, preferring beaches, pools, and walks through the town. In stark contrast, I was a thrill seeker and pushed heavily for exotic destinations, though with him contributing heavier to the finances, I always let it slide for his sake. That year, however, was our 12-year anniversary, and I was determined to push for a location I'd been wanting to visit for forever: Australia. Practically daily, I'd show him all the amazing locations and activities that were on offer, though I could see that they weren't enthralling him as much as they did me. Eventually, though, I knew he'd come around. Not to toot my own horn, but I'm hard to say no to. I'd put that down to my womanly charms. "Wade, fine, you win. We can go there, just don't go overboard, please." He spoke in a tired, reluctant tone as I ambushed him, the moment he returned home from work. Me. "Yes, you're going to love it. Our itinerary will be full to bursting." I couldn't hide my giddiness as I jumped into his arms, knocking the backpack from his shoulder. "Wade, I said please, didn't I?" He smiled nervously as I pretended not to hear him and just squeezed tighter. The moment I saw the tours and resorts, I had a list of 101 things ready to go. This was going to be my way of showing him how much we'd been missing out on, with it hopefully getting him out of his comfort zone. Those 2 weeks would have us up and down the East Coast, experiencing everything from sky to scuba diving, and it was definitely worth it. I knew the travel time was going to be a killer, as 22 hours was about as much flying as he'd done his entire life, but the image of his pale face around 5 hours in is a priceless memory. "Wade, hon, move please. I'm feeling a little lightheaded. I think I'm gonna be sick." As he rushed down the aisle in the direction of the plane's bathroom. He always played off his emotions, even with the confident speech he gave in the airport terminal. Something about not getting motion sick and his ability to sleep for at least 3/4 of the flight, though I can't say I wasn't a little amused to see him dash away into the bathroom. The comment, "It was definitely that tuna sandwich," still brings a smile to my face now. On our travel, I recall laying back in my seat and envisioning all we would experience, hoping it wouldn't fly by too quickly. Those wonderful, priceless memories still to be made excited me, though they are corrupted now. The color and wonder I experienced, tainted and overshadowed by what was supposed to be our highlight. Surprisingly, after a couple of apprehensive days, he began to break free of his shell and actually challenged my previous preconceived notions. Even his public speaking anxiety was crushed under the weight of the Frank Sinatra cover he sang while fully sober on a karaoke night. Falling in love with someone once is an amazing feeling, but looking up at him, living his best life and really pushing the boat out for me, he had me falling all over again. Between the breathtaking scenery and adrenaline-pumping activities, We were loving life more so than ever before, and I was seeing firsthand a positive change in his mood. Over the previous year, choices we made in conjunction with childish promises we couldn't keep had formed a divide with his parents. Though no longer on speaking terms, those issues were forced to the wayside as we focused more on our life together. Regardless, I could tell it got to him. Work hours were ramping up and social time was dwindling, which is why I semi-forced this trip on us. Week 2 was nearing its midpoint, and with it, the most highly anticipated event of our holiday, our reef and cave dive. With my environmental and his geological background, we'd been hyping this up for a while. The boat trip would first take us round the coast where we could stop off, before taking us to 2 localities, one a coral reef and the other a set of interconnected underwater caves. Meeting the other tourists and crew at the dock, I got to chatting as Wade stood silently, listening in with little rebuttal. Along with us, there was a Dutch and German couple, which Wade brought up as odd, due to the fact that the tour wasn't specifically targeted at couples when we booked on. Each member of the crew greeted us as the light blue, slightly worn boat docked. It consisted of the captain, a dive supervisor, and 2 officers. All 4 of the men were very accommodating, showing us round the boat, playing some music, and getting our dive gear in order. Wade, is it just me, or are these guys being really, really nice, like they're overly thankful we're going? Shaking off his comments as I had with his previous ones, I attributed them to mindless speculation brought on by his still niggling apprehensions, although unusually I came to the same conclusion. On the hour or so commute to our first drop-off point, I glanced over at Wade's phone to see him enamored by an article on the caves. Me. What you reading? Don't tell me you're researching the cave. It'll be safe. Stop worrying. Playfully rolling my eyes as his were still locked on the same paragraph. Wade. Nah, nothing like that. Just looking at some local history. Did you know these tours have been going on since the mid-1800s? Apparently, it was a heritage site for Aboriginals, back when sea level was significantly lower. I knew the moment I asked he'd start waffling, but I can agree that potentially seeing some extremely old cave drawings would be cool. Dropping anchor, we geared up ready for the first dive. I could tell Wade was a little nervous, and I can't lie, I was too. Although we had the relevant qualification, it is a different feeling putting it into practice. All being considered, it went pretty well, and we took to the water with ease. The array of bright and luscious coral alongside a thriving mix of marine fauna had us mesmerized. For the majority of the ride to our second locality, we relayed to one another, in an excited, childlike manner, all we had seen. Maybe it was our overinflated self-confidence at the smoothness of our first dive, but regardless, we had little fears disembarking at the cave system. As we got fitted, I do remember hearing the other couples discussing potential faults in their suits from our last location, though I was interrupted from my eavesdropping as Wade asked for help zipping himself up. Wade could tell those comments were niggling at the back of my mind, and with his usual instincts being right on the money, he lay a hand on my head and comforted me. Wade, it'll be okay, I'm always going to be here for you. The plan laid out by our ship's captain was fairly simple. We would wait for our supervisor to swim in, survey the main body of the cave, and fit an umbilical which we would all be attached to. From there, all willing members of the party would travel in, surface in the second chamber, then return to the boat. Unlike the shallower waters of the first location, the cave was situated at an outcrop of rocky islands which were being lapped by choppier waters. Though the crew members repeatedly insisted that we all disembark, one of the couples stayed seated, resulting in only 5 going, including the dive supervisor. The weather out there on the slightly more open ocean can change quickly, or so our captain said, though he felt it was still safe to begin. For the first couple of minutes, we simply swam from the boat's anchor position to the entrance, though the force of the current was noticeably stronger. Reaching the cave opening, our supervisor signaled us to enter, as we swam amongst stalagmites and stalactites jutting from the cave floor and ceiling. It was high tide as we entered, as planned, allowing us to traverse most of what the cave had to offer. Although we were assured it was safe, we were all told in great detail that unclipping from the line was strictly forbidden, as although the caves had been mostly mapped, many of the interconnected passages hadn't been. In a storm event, if caught in one of those passages, a person could become isolated. I vividly remember that warning not fazing me, mostly due to the ease of the first dive. In comparison, Wade frequently went over the safety precautions with me as we were gearing up. Without that being forced into my long-term memory, things could have ended very differently. Shortly after traveling through the first large section of the cave and into a connecting passage, an increased amount of gas bubbles shot from Wade's respirator as he began turning his head frantically. I hadn't noticed as the array of bioluminescent fish and coral had my eye, but we'd become separated from the other couple. The cave system had become increasingly darker as we had passed into this section of the cave, and without knowing our automated headlamps had flicked on. After hearing about their previous problems, I hoped they'd simply turned back or were just slow swimmers. The conveyor belt of divers had been the supervisor, Wade, me, then the couple. Fortunately, Wade had been hyper-prepared and learnt many of the important hand signals. As a conversation occurred between him and the supervisor, I simply trod water and examined our surroundings. I remember thinking that without the connecting line to the boat, it would be an impossible task to navigate to the exit, worse without a light source to guide your way. Breaking me from thought, a hand grasped my shoulder and spun me around. Wade was signaling to me a multitude of instructions that honestly, I couldn't fully decipher. That being said, I understood the gist. We had to stay put. Though I sighed internally, I watched the supervisor unclipped from the line and swim back towards the entrance. As he passed, I caught his facial expression, and for lack of a better word, it perplexed me. I know people deal with pressure in different ways, and I'm sure the feeling of losing someone on one of your tours would be devastating. But he was smiling. Turning back to face Wade, I could tell he had seen the same thing, and it was confusing him as well. As my light shone back towards the exit, his flippers disappeared into the depths as we waited. It could have been 2 seconds or 10 years, but we were both worried. Again, with the hand signals, I couldn't tell what Wade wanted from me, but as he gently nudged me forward in the direction that our supervisor left, I understood we were leaving. We'd barely experienced any extra pressure on our entry, though the moment we attempted to pull ourselves out, we were ensnared by a forceful current. The torrent pushed back hard, attempting to force us deeper into the cave system. Grasping the umbilical with enough force to break rock, I dragged myself forward. The timing couldn't have been worse. Practically the moment we were attempting to leave, the onrush emerged. Assuming that all the other divers had successfully reached the boat, I used that as motivation that we too would escape. That hope was royally crushed as we emerged from the second chamber, light from the cave opening a pinprick in the distance, though it beckoned us home. However, in the couple of moments we fought back against the increasing torrent in that entryway, the cord jostled as the shock waves of releasing tension were shot through our hands. It had been previously pulled tight and firm, but now, with the onslaught crashing into us, it wavered, our grip the only thing between stability and the ragdolling rapids. In a moment that felt like an eternity, a final ripple tore through the line as all our strength evaporated. A crackling whip swiped at us as the frayed end of the cord impacted my upper left torso. My grip slipped, and in a matter of seconds I was tumbling back, unknowingly into Wade. The thing keeping us tethered to our salvation disappeared as we were left to the mercy of the surge, clawing us back into the abyss. Crashing against the jagged walls and each other felt like we were in a pinball machine as we were ripped deeper into the slowly narrowing cave system. Slamming into the opening we had only just emerged from stole the air from my lungs as I gasped, losing connection to my respirator. In the moment or two that my headlamp shone in the direction I was facing, Wade's body collided with mine. The speed at which he traveled gave me no chance to evade, regardless of if I could. His impact forced me through the barely manhole-sized opening. Looking back to him, I caught the faintest image of his face through the mask as he rotated. His scared green eyes mirrored mine, those emerald spheres reflecting his fears, more so for my sake than his own. They were the last memory I could confidently form as I tumbled deeper, losing all cognition. After falling for an unknown length of time, I broke momentarily from my daze. Whilst I failed to keep my mouth shut, I ricocheted from wall to wall, hopelessly holding out my arms to attempt to stabilize my rotation and, in any minuscule chance, grasp onto anything that would slow my descent. Fortunately, I was in favor with someone as my oxygen tank wedged itself in an extremely narrow opening. I could scarcely see 10 centimeters in front of me, let alone breathe. However, in my disorientated state, I knew I didn't have long. Frantically, blindly searching for the buckles, I unstrapped my tank as a vaguely human shape surged through the current and collided with considerable force into another section of the wall. With no time to ponder who, like a crab I turned, scaled the cave wall. The climb mixed with my atrophied lungs could have been my own hell. Maybe I died there in the corner of this endless maze of tunnels, and this was my torment. However, envisioning my savior reaching out a hand from above pushed me forward. His hands, that of an angel, wrenching me up onto the small plateau he was perched. I sputtered and gasped, threatening to inhale all the remaining air in the room as I choked on the unholy amount of water that filled my lungs. Gingerly, my eyes opened to see Wade, still dripping from his episode with the torrent. I knelt there for an unknown lapse of time, sobbing as my body cried out in pain, only to be broken by a soothing voice. "Wade, Hannah, are you all right?" He coughed as he knelt beside me. "Me? Yeah," the meager reply, all I could muster. A warm smile grew on his face. It masked his current cognition to appease mine. With an outstretched hand, he wheeled me up from the puddle I was forming on the stone slab. "Wade, where's your diving gear?" "Han?" A frown taking the place of his warm expression. I couldn't answer as tears welled up and my legs wavered. Sitting on the cold, wet stone, I cried as I burrowed my head into Wade's shoulder. He pleaded that things would be okay, but I couldn't shake the image of us being trapped down here in the damp, dark expanse. The passage was tall but narrow, and as Wade's headlamp shone across the upper limits and then back down to our ledge, only two openings were visible. One larger opening sat above us, with a trickling stream of water dripping down into the onrushing current at our feet. The other was a flooded tributary, which sat at a shallow U-shape. The angle of the opening indicated that the tunnel looped back on itself. However, the only way of knowing would be to traverse it. Waves crashed at the base of our perch as our embrace loosened, and we stared down at the rising water level. We couldn't stay in that state for long, with our only real option being the opening behind us. The realization hit me like a brick wall as I understood that without my gear, I would have to wait for Wade to make the trip alone. Me. "No. You can't leave me here. What if you can't get back? I'll be stuck here on my..." I could feel myself hyperventilating as the sheer terror of being left in complete darkness with the steadily approaching tide. "Wade, Hannah, listen to me. Calm down and listen. There's no way for us to go back, and there isn't another opening that we can get to. This is our only option." His voice began erratic and flustered, but gradually softened as to give me as much reassurance as possible. "Wade, look at me. It's going to be okay. I won't be more than 5 minutes. If I'm correct, then there will be a pocket of air on the other side, and we'll be much safer there than here. You can do this. 5 minutes." With a gentle kiss on my forehead, he slipped on his mask and respirator and plunged into the small opening, disappearing along with the only light source. As quickly as he dove under, the cave settled back to its cold, inanimate regularity. Without the warm yellow glow or his body heat, I shivered as the chilling mist gushed over the perimeter of my lonely plateau. Shuffling back and curling up into a ball on the back wall was the only thing left I could do, as I waited with bated breath for his triumphant return. I know I over-exaggerated, but I couldn't help but imagine the worst possible outcome. There was no way of deducing how long we'd already been in the cave, but sitting there in the fetal position, I began to sob once more. The images of his face, wishing and hoping it wouldn't be my last chance to see him or even tell him how much he meant. The minutes turned to hours or even days as I sat, not moving or sleeping. The beating of the waves at my side drowned out as all external sound melded into one another. The only noise, the soft beating of my heart and shrill, shallow breaths. I don't even remember if I had my eyes closed, as regardless, there was only black. Suddenly, out of the void, a pinprick of light. As it grew, a new sound was added to the background as my ears tuned in to the soft splashing. Breaking the surface tension and pulling himself up to his knees, Wade emerged from the small opening and relayed to me the first words I'd heard in as long as I could remember. "Wade, Han, I think we're all good. The bend isn't that long, so you should only have to hold your breath for a minute. Here, come on." Slightly out of breath, he gestured towards me. The moment he'd spoken, my boundless singular confinement was broken, and we were back in action. Releasing my vice-like lock from around my shins and rolling to a kneel, I examined every aspect of his face, confining that flickering image to memory. Though the time span was unclear, the steadily rising water level threatened to creep over top our perch and engulf our ankles. Slipping on his headlamp, I gave him the all clear. Placing the mask around his eyes, he stretched out a hand and led me to the opening. "Wade, I know it's tight, but just trust me. Stay as straight as possible and shuffle through slowly. I'll be guiding the way, okay? His hazy green eyes calming yet firm. With a silent nod of understanding, we crept up to the door-sized and shaped hole and took the plunge with a deep breath. Though long, the passage was barely wide enough for a person. The crawl through that submerged tunnel was agonizing, though, as Wade said, probably took just under a minute. Each shuffle, my body attempted to snag itself on its ribbed and unconformable circumference. Wade, however, kept his eyes forward, guiding me along as he was thrashed against both sides. Traversing that system once was bad enough, but by the third time in Wade's instance would have been torturous. Even more so with his increased frame compared to me. I was surprised he would even fit. Thinking on that, I don't think I ever asked Wade if he was okay. His minor claustrophobia was glossed over in my need for comfort. I wish I'd pulled myself together enough to notice that he was a mirror of my panic, yet his eyes always stayed that warm green that they had been in the second passage. Shooting from the slightly angled opening and into a larger chamber, we were thrust to the cave floor. An enormous gasp erupted from Wade as he rolled onto his back and stared up at the ceiling. Wade. I didn't think that would work. The whispered yet just audible murmur trickled from Wade's mouth the moment he'd filled his lungs with a new gulp of air. Me. What? I blurted out, as he hesitantly held up his hands and just shrugged. Wade, it doesn't matter now. Come on, let's look for an exit. Unlike our previous confinement, this section was extremely wide, yet only a couple centimeters off Wade's head. Rising to our feet and scanning our surroundings, we could see that, yet again, we were on a plateau. Though this time the damp, dripping cave below was only around half full. Bioluminescent algae and small plants dotted the cave's walls, emanating a soft green glow and lighting up small pockets of the cave. A couple shallow pools dotted the walls as small droplets fell into the larger mass. Sadly, unlike our previous room, there were no other connecting chambers, at least not visible to us. In those couple of minutes scanning the cave's floor, my body gave out. All the adrenaline that had been keeping me going winced out as I slumped to my side. With that, I lay still and the cold embedded its talons once more. Me. Wade, I can't keep going. I'm spent, just lay down with me for a bit. My strained voice wavering too, and I called out for his warmth. Wade, yeah, we can rest, just not for too long. The comforting melody of his voice singing me to sleep as we curled up against one of the walls. Weakly opening my eyes, for a moment I felt Wade's warm embrace and imagined us in bed, reflexively asking him for the time, only to recall our current situation. The cold cavern air and my body's damp exterior replacing that feeling. Evidently he was atrophied too as he lay motionless, with his head down to the group and obscured. Clambering up on shaky legs, I wobbled over to our plateau's terminus. Counterintuitively, the cave floor was now almost completely visible. Not knowing if I was dreaming, I nudged Wade up as he peered over the edge too. Simultaneously, a shallow rumble and quiet sucking sound could be heard from deeper within the cave. Wade, you think it's a tropical storm? Makes sense if it is. All the water rushing in then getting sucked out as it passes us. His voice echoing in the now hollow cavern. Mindlessly ignoring his question, my still sleep-deprived eyes focused in on something down on the far wall of the cave where the draining was emanating. Fortunately, as the water level had dropped, we'd been given an opportunity. A semicircular opening was now visible and for us a potential way out. Wade, I don't think we're getting down there safely. Why not just go back the way we... His voice trailed off as he turned back to our way in. Just like the cave below, our way in had been drained. Without a high enough water level, there was no way we'd be getting back up the length of that tunnel. Me. Guess we are then. My lackluster energy reserves and the wet walls weren't boding well, but as my mouth dried and his stomach grumbled, we began our descent. Though the sides weren't steep or even jagged, they were covered in a thick layer of soaked bioluminescent algae. Each foothold, feigning to give way and send us hurtling down to the cave's floor. Wade, in a typical attempt to reassure me, jinxed us as a weak grip caused me to lose my hold as I slid from around halfway down. The sound reverberated through my body as I winced and cried out in pain. Though my landing had been cushioned, it was merely broken by a thinly veiled puddle, no more than a couple of centimeters deep. Splashing into it, my right knee collided with the hard stone floor. I could hear the faint sound of him calling down as he rushed, though my mind was focusing all its energy on telling me how much my knee was fucked. Though I could stand, no significant weight could be put on it. For the next inconceivable stretch of time, I hobbled from section to section, taking the seemingly safest alternatives for navigating with my injury. I'd happily later find out that I'd chipped a section of my patella off, resulting in the cartilage on its right side being worn to the bone. For the rest of the time I was moving whilst in the cave, I could hear, feel, and envision the action of my kneecap grinding against my femur. I was on the brink of collapse. The lack of food or drinkable water had me running on empty, and the agony of my knee was weighing us down. Entering our final chamber, I caved. Dropping to the floor with tears in my eyes, I propped myself up against the wall. Me, I can't do it anymore. Just leave me. Tears filling my eyes as I hid my face from Wade. Wade. Han, come on, let's keep going. Me, go where? We've been walking for who knows how long. Just admit it, we're trapped. Wade. Han. Me. No, you can't fix it. Just stop, please. My sobs turning to anger as I directed all my fear and pain at Wade. Wade. Hannah Jane Fairstone, I know you're in pain. Remember when I broke my leg playing football? You took time off and got us pizzas while we watched TV all day. I tell you what, when we're out of here, I'll do that for you. I'll make sure it's chicken and peppers too. We just have to keep going, okay? Me. Okay. I knew the pain was pushing me to the edge, and he was just doing whatever he could in a frankly hopeless situation. Dragging myself into the next dimly lit section, we stopped for a short break, as Wade examined a small pool. Curiously, he was kneeling and watching the surface as it swayed back and forth like a wave. As he did, I stared up at the wall above. It could have been the pain, but I saw what looked to be drawings. Before I could alert Wade to them, he was already clipping on his harness and tank. Wade. Hannah, give me 2 seconds, okay? I'm just going to dip under and have a little look. Don't worry, I promise it'll be only a sec. Though I disapproved, he moved before I could even make a sound, and I was alone again, quietly gazing up at the crudely drawn people, plants, and what seemed to be a set of caves. They seemed to depict an array of tunnels, all connecting to what I hoped was the one I resided in. With a startling splash, Wade reemerged. Wade. I think I found a way out, or at least a path to an exit. Tears some faint white light and seemingly a current forming small waves, his excited tone only rising as I pointed at the drawings. Me. If someone drew these, then maybe you're right and there is a way out down there, but we only have one tank. Yet again, with my attention directed elsewhere, I was blind to see what he was really suggesting. Me. No, you're not leaving me again. Wade. It might be our only... Me. No, you don't even know if there is an exit. Don't take that risk. Wade. If there's some light, then we must be close. There's more than enough for me to get out and open the flare. Me. Please just stay with me, Wade. I don't want to be alone. Wade. Hannah, with your knee you can barely walk, let alone swim. If we have even the smallest chance of both getting out, I need to try. Me. What if it's just a dead end or you get stuck? I don't want to die alone. Wade. I promise I won't be long. Me. You know that's a lie. Wade, it'll be okay. I'm always going to be here for you. With that, he kissed my forehead and dove down into the depths of that pool. Once again alone, I waited and waited and waited. As the geological timescale raced past, all cognition of time vanished as I reverted back to that fetal position. The soft swaying of the pool and dripping of the cave walls melded together with my increasingly loud internal cogs, creating a blistering cacophony of sounds that hummed through me. Sleep was as unattainable as Wade's current location. Though burying my head into my working knee, I imagined his face and voice, willing me forward. For fleeting moments, it was as if he was there, speaking straight into my ear and moving throughout the cave, though his wisp wasn't physical. That memorialized ghost drifted in and out of existence as my mind began to power down for what would be an indefinite rest. Feeling my mind booting up again, a mixture of alien sounds pierced my dulled mind. Soft beeps and the sound of other voices permeated the space I now resided. With a slow, flickering push, my eyes opened and were bathed in the bleached white of a room. I lay, connected to a hospital bed, with nurses rushing in and out of the room. A balding man stood at my bedside and asked repeatedly an array of questions that were dampened, as if I were underwater. Moving my rusted neck muscles to the opposite side of the room, a man stood at the window bathed in the glow of light pouring in. With a soft vibrato, his voice played a familiar tune. Time to get up, Han. Stretching and blinking, I arose from the bed as the faint sounds all crashed into life. and I was being comforted by Wade's parents and my sister, alongside the doctor's prior questions. However, the man was gone, and in his absence a hole larger than the cave I'd been trapped in formed within. Revisiting these memories, more so than the ones within the cave, are soul-crushing. Hours after the news, I was ready to revert back to my old ways and make a reckless and selfish decision. Again, what brought me back to sense were his words, guiding me through those passages, comforting my hysteria and pushing me to make the best decision. Those, as well as all we created in 12 years, were mine and only mine. Without me to broadcast all he was, those memories would fade to time. Even in life, he pushed me to be better, and in death, willed me on. I will hold tight the image of his face, which photos and videos don't do justice. Those warm green eyes, my final core memory. I present these journals to you as a warning. There are churches that are indistinguishable from your Christian churches. Well, until you get to the inner circle. They pray to neither Yahweh nor Jesus, even though they say they do. They pray to someone whose name I can never write. A God who loves to make himself known, but because of forces even beyond him, it is quite difficult for him to do so. A God who can give those he loves whatever he wants, but only those he loves. This isn't a conspiracy of how elites secretly serve him or how he sits in the background dictating every move. This is an account of how he's ruined my life. Forgive my arrogance in the following journal entries. Pride before the fall and all that. Welcome, losers. Today's a big day for me and you. For you, this is the start of how you get everything you want in life by reading my memoirs. And for me, this is the day I start my first and hopefully last romantic relationship with a certain beautiful girl named Kay Mackenzie. I won't go into too much detail about her because I'm sure you've heard of her, because I'm sure by the time you read this I'll be famous, and so will she. She'll be married to me, duh. Anyway, here's the most important thing for you to know about the universe. This will change your life and make my memoir sell out. Read this slowly. Come close. I'll whisper this to you. The first commandment is the most overlooked. You shall have no other gods before me. It implies there are other gods, and oh boy, does he love proving he's real. I'm not a fan of him, for reasons you'll learn later, but you might be. There are two ways we know with 100% certainty he's real, so this one's more like a party trick. If we try to say our God's name on camera, something will happen and the name is never heard. This can be as simple as the camera losing audio for 1 second, or a deer wailing like it's been stabbed in the background to cover up the sound. I've heard both. If we try to write it, we get similar effects. Laptops shut down, ink spills, or the pencil lead splits and leaps right into the eye of the writer. I've seen it all. Now, here's what he does that's beyond a party trick. He's what I, to the anger of my friends, call a coupon honoring God. That means if you believe Yahweh or whoever did a miracle, any miracle, and go into one of my God's temples and tell him you have faith that Yahweh did it and state that you have faith that he can do the same, he'll do it just like that. You can be healed from cancer, legs growing back, and people being raised from the dead. I've seen it all. Where are these churches, you ask? Everywhere, really. You wouldn't spot a difference on the outside or inside on an average Sunday service. Only once you reach the inner circle is the true nature of the church revealed to you. There are some mega churches, mid-sized churches, and struggling small churches. The small churches believe they are small because they teach the true word, and thus attract fewer people, and they disdain the bigger churches. The big churches don't think about the small churches until they need to give them money because they're dying. I'll let you decide who's the better church. I know many of you are asking, why would a church ever be poor if you could simply ask God for whatever you want? Well, we'll get to that later. I'll give you a list of churches in the back of this book, and you can either attend them and ask God for whatever or start a new holy war. Not my problem. I don't care either way as long as you paid for this book, which pays for my retirement. Now let me tell you about my God and my girl, because they're intertwined in this religion of mine. When I was 13, about 4 years ago, we had a special ceremony with our youth group. All of our youth group were driven by van to one of the temples. The churches are easy to find, but the temples, where the real power is, they're hard to find. This one was out in a cornfield, isolated and alone. It was not a grand thing and was closer in appearance to a shack in the woods than a grand cathedral. Cows grazed in the grass in front of it. Oh, cows, those poor, poor cows. I'll never look at them the same again. We exited the bus to go to the temple in a silent single file line. Talking without permission was an offense that resulted in physical punishment. We shivered in the rough wind and the cold drizzle of rain. Most of us kept our heads down to avoid the gaze of the high cornstalks. Silence was demanded, but fear was allowed, so our single file scurried and shook all the way to the temple. "Be seated," Sharon, our youth group leader, told us and went away to who knows where. We did as we were commanded. She did not tell us to be silent, but we understood. The wind beat on the tinted windows as if it was demanding to come in. It shook the whole poorly made temple. The red carpet that lined the auditorium danced in front of my eyes. If we looked at it too long, we would swear it was not solid, but a thick liquid, too thick for blood. The wooden pews groaned at any movement we would dare make. Many a kid has been beaten because their bench groaned too loud. So we sat in corpse-like silence and forced stillness that made my heart race around my chest until Sharon finally returned. Sharon came from the back of the sanctuary and held the hand of some kid a couple of years younger than us, maybe 9. I did not like Sharon. Everything about her screamed fake and uptight. Her static platinum hair and pink nails were too fake. Her clothes were tight, and even as a child I wondered why she dressed like that to teach youth group. I've seen the average youth group leader you guys have for church, and no, she did not look like that. I'm not sure why she wanted to be a youth group leader. I don't even think she liked kids. Oh well, maybe that's why. You'll see what I mean. Anyway, Sharon escorted the small child between the 2 pews where we sat. As she walked in, the benches quieted their groans and the wind eased its assault against the door to more of a polite and creepy knock. The carpet still looked swimmable. "Today we get to feed God," Sharon said, and smiled with a perky demeanor foreign to her. We all shifted in our seats and tried not to appear afraid. We forgot food. How could we feed our God without food? We forgot to bring food, and this would make God mad, our parents mad, and Sharon mad. Most of us weren't stupid, so we knew not to admit our flaws. Instead, we spoke to each other in hand signals and concerned looks to determine if anyone brought any food we could split. No one was stupid enough to admit we forgot to bring food, except this one girl in the front row who audibly yelped. We all turned to her. "Mrs. Sharon," the girl said. "Sorry, I mean Ms." the girl corrected mid-stutter. She was shivering, maybe out of nerves and maybe out of fear, or maybe she was still recovering from the elements outside. Ms. Sharon's smile was as hard as stone. She hated being reminded she was unmarried. Honestly, I think the girl was too oblivious to realize it. She went on stammering all the way through. Her hands moved up and down as she spoke like the most frazzled symphony conductor ever. "I'm sorry I forgot to bring food. I will do better next time. I always write stuff like this in my planner, and I must have forgotten this time. I don't normally do this, you know I'm a good student." "Ms. Mackenzie," Sharon said, stone smile unbent, "I didn't tell you to bring food because I have it." A great fire leaped from the altar at the end of the hall. The altar of our God stood about 9 feet tall. He had the head of a bull, the sculpted arms of an Olympian, and a furnace that served as a stomach, and that furnace roared now. We all sat in our seats and our eyes avoided the fire. You've probably never been in the presence of real supernatural power. You feel the need to hide from it and are haunted by an evil insignificance. Maybe you felt insignificant looking at stars. It dawns on you that you are small compared to the universe, but I bet you embraced that. I bet it made you want to see all there was of life. I bet you took risks. I bet you traveled. Well, I call this evil insignificance because it does the opposite. This power made me want to end life's search. There was too much power and too many things that were beyond me. I wanted to stay in this seat, hidden and scared, and never have to face the uncertainty of life again. My heart fled, my head danced, and my mouth went dry. We were supposed to be silent, but I heard myself panting. Sharon did not mind it. She walked forward. Her heels did not clack against the carpet, but instead made a splashing sound as if she walked on a puddle. She dragged the kid behind her. "Oh, no, no, no," I thought, but didn't dare say. The kid was the food. I know the kid was drugged. He had to be. Anyone with any survival instincts would have ran from her. She strode forward with confidence. Perhaps this is why she wanted to work with kids. Perhaps this was her reward. She got to feel all of our God's presence and not want to shrivel away like we wanted to. All I could think was, no, 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 the closer they got. I didn't want to watch this, but I didn't want to be next. So I had to sit there, and I was supposed to keep my eyes open, but I couldn't manage that. I'm sorry I'm a coward, but I covered my eyes. It didn't feel right to see. That wasn't enough, though. My eyes couldn't close tight enough. Bright orange light crept in them. I squeezed with every muscle in my body and they couldn't go tighter. Pain swarmed in the middle of my head because of the effort. Then came his screams once he was in the fire. He was so confused. I heard a what in there and so many cries for help. I opened my eyes to see if she would. She kicked him with her heel and he was pushed back into the flames. Then she laughed. Then they all laughed. And I felt sick because I didn't know what was funny. I didn't know the kid, which meant he wasn't part of the inner circle of the church. So we were told not to care about him or his safety. And that hurt me. For the past few months, I was having physical aches of pain at what I witnessed we did to unbelievers. It created a deep numbness within me for all things except me. How could I love my God or my people who would do such a thing? The other kids did not feel this way. I can't blame them, I guess. It worked out for them. They laughed and made fun of how he wiggled in the flames. They marveled at how you could see his skeleton. They mocked how loud he got, and they mocked his eventual silence. And then the flame went out, and there was quiet, except for one person's sniffles. Sniffles that soon grew into tears. Something that was frowned upon. Why should we pity something that was our God's will? The nervous girl from the front cried. She viciously wiped away tears from her face because she knew her tears were heinous, her empathy evil. She understood her own punishment would be coming. The other kids stared at her. That's what I hated the most. They didn't have the shame to turn away from her. No, they stared because they genuinely could not understand why she was crying. Or they had the sick desire to enjoy her upcoming punishment. The girl could have saved herself from this punishment. She maybe could have avoided it if she pretended that her tears were about anything else. But she kept saying, "I'm sorry, I don't mean..." It's just they were so young. As Sharon walked now, the world felt the weight of her steps. I felt it again. Again, I had to be a hopeless spectator to an ugly stomach-turning spectacle. Sharon's heels clacked against the ground, resolute to deliver a punishment. That girl was Kay Mackenzie, and that's the moment I knew I loved her. I grew numb because of this world we lived in. She didn't. I fell in love with the girl because she cared even when she wasn't supposed to. Kay is a small girl and her two front teeth are big, like mine. And she talks too much, in the opinion of everyone but me. And they say the same about me. And she gets depressed sometimes, but won't tell anybody because, like me, that's not her role in life. We're here to make people laugh, and we would never burden anyone else with what makes us sad. Like me, she has a hard time expressing herself to people she's not close to. Which is the saddest of tragedies for them and my saving grace, because if she did, they'd be hopelessly in love with her like me. That is the wonderful heart of Kay Mackenzie. "Shut up," Sharon said, and her hand groped at her side as if she prepared to give a wicked strike. This wouldn't be that strange for us. Our parents signed a permission slip that said we could be disciplined as they saw fit. Sharon didn't strike Kay, though. Sharon held back. Drip, drip, drip. My eyes left Kay and went up to the ceiling where a strange salty liquid dripped from the church. It crashed to the floor, filling the room with the smell of salt. "Stop crying," Sharon said. Kay scrunched up her face and still tears escaped her. Plop, plop, plop. The salt water expanded and fell from the church in head-sized drops, bursting, spreading, shooting out like BB gun bullets. We took cover behind the pews to avoid the stinging of the water. "Please," Sharon said. "No," begged. Something I'd never heard her do. Kay couldn't stop. The dripping from the sky stopped, sort of. Floosh. Behind me, an evil miracle happened. A waterfall fell from the church onto a girl named Monica Peters. Monica collapsed under the weight of the water. Her body was bombarded by an impossible force, but her face remained untouched. I ran to help her. Sputtering and crying, she crawled forward in my direction to escape it. Dropping to the floor, I reached out my hand to help her, careful not to let the water hit me. As the saying goes, miracles happen once in a while when you believe. But this miracle wouldn't let Monica Peters leave. Doubling force, then tripling, water from hell fell from above and ripped away her skin, then flesh, then meat from her bones, until I watched her life leave her eyes. Perhaps her spirit journeyed wherever the water came from. All eyes fell on Kay, hoping she was done crying and blaming her for Monica's death. But who could stop crying under the weight of all that guilt? "Please forgive me," she said, damning us with her tears the whole time. "Moo, cows? Moo! Have you ever heard a cow screech? It is not a pleasant sound. Crack, crack, crack." Outside something was breaking, maybe sticks, maybe bones. We didn't know. We stood statue still, preparing to run if we needed to. The door from the back of the church burst open. Piling in were cows crying and stretched into impossible positions by our God's will. They ran like humans and cried like only animals can cry, a perfect innocence born from being punished for a reason beyond their comprehension. Us kids were a lot like animals then, punished for something, by something that went beyond our reason. Hooves hit heads in the chaos. Blood painted the church. The trampling of bodies sent my classmates to meet Monica in the afterlife. Kay stood there. Maybe her guilt wanted her to die. My childish crush wanted her to live. I tackled her and pushed her under the pews. Moose and I want my mommies choired through the church, and I hoped our God was happy with it, his evil praise, because I promised if I lived I would never worship him. Silence fell. Fresh grass and blood mixed in the musty smell of the church. I rose from my hiding place to see the chaos. Dead. All of my classmates and even the cows lay dead and broken for no good reason except a God got upset a girl had empathy. Only Sharon, myself, and Kay lived from that horrible day. That was years ago. Kay and I will start dating tomorrow and then marry within the year. That's her. That's the girl I'd go to hell for. We will leave this God together, and I'll give her a life of peace where her empathy won't be punished.